Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
On that fateful day, Emily's world turned upside down when she was informed that her tiny daughter Chloe was completely blind. Immediately after birth, the little girl seemed like a perfectly normal baby. But soon the mother began to notice some oddities in her behavior. "Jason, it seems that our tiny girl does not respond to toys at all," Emily said worriedly. "What are you saying?" "My husband couldn't believe it. Look, I show her the rattle, and she turns her head." "Yes, because it rings. Show her this pink horse, for example," the wife suggested. Jason swung the big plush horse from side to side over the crib, where the baby in the adorable yellow jumpsuit lay. Tiny waved her arms. "See, she's waving her hands. She wants to take the horse," said the father. "Do you want to take the horse, little Chloe?" "She's just waving her hands, not reaching for the toy." Emily shook her head. She didn't even look or move her head. Maybe the toy is too big and she's scared of it. Let's try something else. Jason went to the closet and picked up a small red teddy bear. He went back to his daughter's crib and began to show her the toy again. "It's really not responding, is it?" He frowned. "That's what I'm talking about," Emily nodded. "She used to stare at the musical carousel above the crib and I thought she was following it with her eyes. But as it turned out, she was just listening to the music. When I was spinning the merry-go-round by hand, I never once noticed Chloe fixing her gaze on it. Maybe she's too young." Jason wouldn't give up. "No, honey. I see how other kids her age react. I'm afraid there's something wrong. I'm very afraid it's autism. I'll have her seen by a doctor tomorrow." "Don't worry, dear. If there was anything wrong, they would have told you at the hospital." "You're wrong. They don't notice everything in the hospital. Some abnormalities show up later. Didn't the pediatrician notice anything at the appointments?" "No, he did not say anything," surprised the worried father. "Only measured weight, temperature, asked about sleep and stool. So we should go to another doctor, to a better specialist." So Emily went. The next day she put the baby in her car seat and took her to the doctor. She couldn't wait to allay her fears. Fate couldn't have laughed so cruelly at them after so much anticipation and preparation for the baby. However, the doctor did not reassure Emily, but referred her to an ophthalmologist. The young mother left the office in tears. How could it be? How could it happen that her little girl was born completely blind? "How is it that even alcoholics give birth to healthy children?" she asked the doctor through her tears. "And me, who so carefully prepared for pregnancy, followed all the recommendations: do not drink, do not smoke, breathe fresh air away from cars, even refused coffee. I am an avid coffee drinker, tried not to take the phone extra times, sat at the computer for a maximum of half an hour a day, if absolutely necessary. How was my child born blind?" The doctor looked at Emily sympathetically and shook his head. "You had absolutely nothing to do with it. It's something genetic, perhaps even from your husband. But you're wrong about the children of alcoholics. If they seem healthy to you, believe me, they actually have a host of problems, mental and physical. Personally, when a patient comes to me, I can tell by the look on their face if the mother drank during pregnancy. But you have done everything possible for your child, and I am sure you will do even more. Now are other times, and a blind child can adapt in society, become a full member of it. I'm sure everything can still be fixed," Emily insisted. "I'll take her to the best specialists." "That's the right thing to do," said the doctor. "We should knock on every door." But Emily realized from the look on his face that she had no chance. Nevertheless, the caring mother began taking her to all the specialists she could find. Jason, who could not come to his senses for a long time after the news of the terrible diagnosis, spared no effort and money for trips to doctors. However, everything was in vain. Chloe was hopelessly blind. It took a long time for the couple to accept the inevitable. Their child is an invalid. They went through all the stages of accepting their situation. First anger, then denial. Then they tried to bargain with fate, with doctors, and even with God. And then they just accepted the fact that little Chloe would never see. "Doctor, can the baby see anything?" Emily asked the doctor one day. "Unfortunately, nothing," the doctor shook his head. "So she's doomed to eternal darkness. Close one eye with your hand and keep the other one open." Emily obeyed. "Now try to see something." No matter how hard Emily tried, she saw nothing, no darkness or anything else. "That's how your daughter sees the world. I mean, she doesn't see it at all." This information frightened Emily at first, but then she felt better. When she closed both eyes and saw the darkness, in which every now and then flashed some incomprehensible figures and images, she felt a little creepy that her daughter could see all these strange phenomena. But if she sees absolutely nothing, perhaps it is even better. Nothing will scare her, especially while she's still small and doesn't understand much. Yes, perhaps it's better to see nothing than darkness. When Emily realized that she couldn't make her daughter sighted, she decided to do her best to adapt her to her environment and make her as independent as possible. Jason was glad that his wife had finally gotten out of her depression and stopped beating herself up over what had happened. He worked hard so that his wife and daughter had enough money to attend special teachers who helped Chloe to adapt to life without one of the 5 most important human senses. Under the guidance of teachers, the spouses even equipped a sports room for the girl, where she could safely run, jump, climb. Emily was happy to note how the girl was moving more and more freely in space each time. And sometimes it even seemed that she was sighted. Over time, the little girl explored not only the sports room, but the entire apartment. She could even run around the common room, run out into the corridor, into the kitchen, and never once fell. "Wow, you've got some nimble moves," girl Jason said. "I thought I was going to have to buy a guide dog." And then, turning to his wife, he added, "Emily, this is all you're doing." Emily smiled back and kissed her husband. She was pleased that he appreciates her efforts, because she really tried hard, even singing career abandoned. Although her husband suggested that she record a CD and offer it to the radio. Emily played the guitar very well and sang beautifully. It was thanks to her talent that she met Jason. At one of the parties, she picked up her guitar and sang. When she finished, Jason came up to her and introduced himself as a producer and said that he saw her as a big star and would love to work with her. Emily couldn't believe that Jason was a producer. He looked more like a backyard bully. But it turned out that looks are deceiving, and by the time they met, the young man had worked as an agent for a couple of forgotten celebrities. At first, he and Emily tried to promote, but the girl soon realized that publicity is not for her. In addition, at the beginning of the way, she had to be hypocritical, smiling at those with whom she did not even want to say hello. There were a lot of lies and falsehoods. Emily decided to sing for herself, not in a hurry to record an album with songs of her own authorship. And then whatever would happen. But after the birth of her sick child, she had to give up singing. But Jason's business was going uphill. Yes, so much so that he even intended to get rid of the old parental apartment and build a house. Husband and wife often dreamed about how happy they would be together in the house. But things were pretty slow, and by the time Chloe was 7 years old, there was only a box on the lot. "It's okay. I'll do what I said I'd do. We'll get the house finished," Jason said, and Emily nodded, smiling. She didn't like to rush things, to push, to let things take their course. They had money for vacations at the best resorts, beautiful clothes, a car each, delicious food, pleasant leisure. A woman did not have to complain, especially she could not work and fully devote herself to her family and daughter. And Chloe and Emily were inseparable. The young mother liked to say that she gave birth to a girlfriend. Despite her blindness, the girl was active, well-read, and very bright. In her 7 years, she could play the piano and sang marvelously, singing talent inherited from her mother. Emily enjoyed listening to her daughter's melodious voice, and despite the fact that her own talent dusted on the shelf as an unreleased record, she felt that she had no reason to complain. The only thing she wished her husband was home more often. As Jason's career progressed, he was less and less likely to be seen with his family. He missed them a lot, but there was nothing he could do about it. Of course, he called. Always wondered how his girls were doing. But more and more often it happened, so that even the new year, on March 8th, Emily and Chloe celebrated separately from the head of the family. At first, the young wife was very upset, and the little daughter also missed her daddy. But eventually Emily came to terms with the fact that for her husband is important self-fulfillment and good earnings. After all, he tried for the family and was very tired. However, as time went on, Emily began to notice that her husband was missing not only because of his work. He always had some parties, all kinds of business meetings and dinners. In addition, he traveled with artists on tour. As a result, he could not see his wife and daughter for weeks. The woman sadly realized that they ceased to be in the first place for the main man in their lives. Sure, Jason always arrived with flowers for his wife and toys for his daughter, but Emily felt it was more of a payoff than a gift from the heart. The more successful the producer became, and the more money he had, the cooler he treated the family. It wasn't uncommon for him to arrive drunk with some rowdy friends. Emily would smile at the guests, set the table for them, then clean up after them. The parties often ended in broken dishes and a mess in the house, and each time she felt more and more like her life was going downhill. The only salvation, an outlet for the unhappy wife, was a guitar. It was a very special guitar, very beautiful, snow white. Jason bought it for Emily when Chloe was not even in the project. He hadn't made much money then, and buying a musical instrument had put a serious hole in his budget. You could say that he spent every penny on it. But he knew that Emily played the guitar beautifully and sang romances divinely. Emily treasured this guitar, always very carefully treated it. When she and Chloe became sad, the woman took the snow white instrument and gently strummed the strings. Sometimes she just played a musical composition, but more often she sang. The blind girl listened to her mother's voice with a smile, swaying to the beat, and sometimes even singing along. "Jason, you don't even ask how Chloe is doing," Emily reproached her husband, when he, returning after another business trip, almost from the doorstep began to tell about the success of the next concert and about the money he earned. He talked and talked. Emily realized that she was getting to know her husband, that he was not the same as he had been before. She realized that she didn't need all that money at all, but she wanted to hug Jason, the old Jason she had come to love. He was soft, warm, the kind man who wore a roomy t-shirt and old worn jeans. He could wear the same jacket for years, but he could buy expensive perfume for his wife or theater tickets. He could eat pasta for a month and then go on a second honeymoon. The old Jason was a little crazy, but this one's not. He's always focused and focused. He dresses smart. He's sharp-tongued. It's so unfair that people change in marriage. You marry one, and he suddenly gives you a surprise in the form of an unexpectedly changed character. You need to sign a contract at the time of marriage so that the person remains the same as the moment he or she puts his or her signature. And no surprises. Otherwise, you have to live with a complete stranger, and it can completely ruin your life. When Emily reproached Jason for his lack of attention to his daughter, the man was very indignant. He began to give a lot of arguments, listed gifts for his daughter, recalled how much money he had spent on the child's treatment, how much energy, nerves, and finances he spent on the house under construction, which was still not ready. Then he recalled the car he'd given Emily. His wife remained silent as Jason's mind was frothing at the mouth about financial security. She was bitterly aware that their paths were beginning to diverge. Sometimes the man realized it himself. When he thought about his family, about what they had been through together, he felt guilty. He realized that it was all in the past, and now his values and goals had changed. "Yeah, I know. Well, maybe you should go on vacation somewhere," he suggested at once. Where to the woman sighed. "My friend opened a recreation center. It's gorgeous, a lake, a forest, houses with panoramic windows, a bathhouse, a restaurant. There's no connection. Chloe and myself will rest." Some new acquaintance again, Emily thought. At first she wanted to give up the idea, but then suddenly decided. "Why not? I'll go with my daughter, really." "You know, Jason, why not?" Emily said. "Why say no? I mean, you describe it so beautifully." "Here we go. Here you go. I'll call him, and they'll see you there." Jason was glad that for once recently he had aroused his wife's emotions. Emily didn't want to delay the trip. She'd just gotten her car back from the repair shop, and she missed traveling. She really wanted to take one of her girlfriends with her, but no one could keep her in Chloe company. "But nothing, dear, we'll be together and have fun," she promised her daughter and hugged her skinny shoulders. "Of course, Mommy. Chloe said and smiled. Yes, we'll take the guitar. No, Kitty, I'm afraid for her. It is very dear to me, so we won't take it on a trip. But you know, in places like this, there's a guitar and maybe a piano. I'll definitely play it for you, honey. Mother and daughter hugged again. They loved hugging and tried to show their love as often as possible. Mom, I love you so much, said Chloe. And I you, my baby, answered Emily and pressed the girl to herself. Her daughter was 7 years old, and the older she became, the more sensible and interesting it was with her. That's why Emily had no doubt she would not miss her on the trip. Chloe would always tell her something or sing a song. Jason spent his girls with a pure heart, and he went to one of the elite areas of the city, where he had fun at his mistress's apartment. Their antics were in full swing when the phone rang. No, Jason, don't pick up the phone. Don't pick up the phone, hissed the mistress. Emily, this could be a very important business call. In our business, every call can be crucial. Despite the girl's resistance, he picked up the phone. Hello, Jason Alexandrovich, came a dry official voice. Yes, who are you? Tensed the producer, realizing that in their creative circles do not talk like that. It's the police. Do we have your daughter? Come here. What do you mean? What happened? Jason was puzzled, suspecting it was some kind of divorce. They found her on the highway. We'll give you more details when we get there, the voice said. Jason began to dress hurriedly. He hadn't heard his lover's accusation, hadn't even noticed the pillow she'd thrown at his head. After pulling on his clothes and buttoning himself up, he rushed to the ward, where his frightened daughter was waiting for him. There was a huge abrasion on her face and a bruise on her head. The blind child was shaking even though she had already been sedated. Jason rushed over to his daughter and pulled her to him. Chloe, baby, what's wrong? The worried father asked. Daddy, Daddy, exclaimed the girl and felt his face to be sure, though she didn't need to. Chloe recognized her father by smell and timbre of voice, even by steps. Put a crowd of men and women in front of the little girl, and she will recognize her relatives, although she sees nothing. What's wrong, my girl? A man tried to find out. A trim woman in a uniform approached Jason and offered to go with her. No, let my daughter wait. Don't worry about her. Keep an eye on her. The confused producer followed the woman, and as the door slammed shut behind them, she told him the terrible news. Your wife's car has been in a terrible accident. You'll need to come with us for a lineup. Are you saying my wife is dead? Jason's breath smelled of everything, and the case was inside. You have no sympathy, the woman said. Apparently, she'd decided to kill herself by dropping the baby off at the highway and driving off. At high speed, she skidded and fell off a cliff. After the accident, the car caught fire as your wife was apparently unconscious from the impact. She had no chance of survival. We'll have more details after the forensics. Now let's go. Brace yourselves. This is a tough one. Jason was put in the car, and he was so deep in his thoughts that he didn't realize he was at the door to the basement. As he stepped confidently across the threshold, he suddenly realized where he had come. Something inside him turned, and Jason almost lost consciousness. Get ready, someone said from behind him, and put a hand on his shoulder. He didn't even realize if it was a man's voice or a woman's. Jason was led over to a table with a sheet covering his body. The man in the white robe looked into Jason's eyes, apparently reading the readiness to see the terrible things in them, pulled the sheet away from the body. The producer's eyes darkened instantly. He clutched at his solar plexus and barely managed not to faint. Is that her? The same unknown voice asked him from behind. It's her. Jason nodded and turned away. Did you get a good look? The voice asked again. Yes, I see it. It's definitely her, Jason said with difficulty and ran out of the room. He hurried outside for a breath of fresh air and to think about how he was going to live his life. Yes, he'd cheated on his wife, but it was a physical affair. His heart was always with Emily and Chloe. He likened cheating to eating at a restaurant. Delicious, expensive, beautiful. But nothing compares to a dinner at home, where perhaps they offer the simplest dishes, but they are prepared with heart and love. Nevertheless, sometimes you want to go to a restaurant too. And now Jason was regretting it. He regretted that he hadn't taken his wife and daughter to the recreation center himself. He could have lied to Emily, saying that he had a lot to do, that he had important meetings, and that a lot depended on them. And she did not argue. She kissed him, hugged him, and wished him success. After that, she got into her car with her daughter and left for good. But why did she do that? Police say it's unlikely she had anyone helping her. Most likely, she failed to control her car. But then she wouldn't have dropped her daughter off on the highway. Didn't Jason notice that his wife was so tired of all this life, his constant traveling, his blind child, that she threw her daughter off a cliff? Maybe she was taking something illegal. You don't know? Jason jerked and turned around. The woman from the ward was standing behind him, and her words were so in sync with his thoughts that he almost dropped his cigarette. I don't think so, the man replied, confused. Emily had always been in favor of a healthy lifestyle. She did yoga. She hardly ever drank alcohol. Wine with her girlfriends and on holidays. But I didn't see her much. A lot of work lately. The ME took the necessary tests. Soon there will be an answer, and we will know everything, the woman said dryly. I've been working for a long time, so I know very well that sometimes a husband and wife know much less about each other than friends and other people around them. Be strong. The important thing is that your daughter is alive. Have you talked to Chloe? I hope you were delicate, asked the man with hope. But from the woman's look, he realized that he could not count on it. The girl says she was tired and fell asleep with her headphones on. She woke up to someone pushing her out of the car. Someone? Jason wondered. Yes, someone, the woman nodded and asked for a light. So she's saying it wasn't her mother, the man said, holding the lighter to the cigarette. Could she have seen anything? The woman asked a reasonable question. You see, she couldn't, but she could feel it. Your daughter only felt when she was pulled out of the car and thrown to the ground. Your wife grabbed the child under the armpits and roughly pushed her out, leaving her sitting on the curb. By the time the girl realized what had happened, she was gone. It couldn't have happened, exclaimed the man. You said yourself there was no one else in the car. Chloe was driving with her mother. Emily turned on her English lesson so that Chloe would listen on the road, and the girl discreetly put on headphones and listened to some music of her own. Then I rocked her and she fell asleep. Yes, she falls asleep quickly in the car. According to her, the car didn't stop. The mother wasn't talking to anyone, or she would have heard it. Through the headphones, the man frowned. Well, why not? Blind people have sensitive hearing. The woman shrugged and blew a puff of smoke into Jason's face. Look, Jason, I know you loved your wife, but believe me, if she was using substances, even mild ones, they could cause mental confusion, even schizophrenia. She could be delusional, and in that state she was no longer your loving wife and gentle mother, but a monster. Please don't say that, the man said and put his palm forward, making a forbidding gesture. Okay, I understand, the woman sighed. We have to take the child away. She's still in the ward. If I find out anything, I'll call you. I expect the same from you. Let me know every little detail. The next day, Jason got a call that his wife was a chronic drug addict. No way, said the dumbfounded man. Blood type 3 positive. Yes, the man nodded. There were traces of a tattoo on her left leg. You can't make out the picture, but it was there. Your wife had a tattoo on her left leg. Yes, Jason sighed. If you have any doubts, we can run a DNA test. Would you need saliva samples from your daughter? No, the man said. She's had enough moral trauma. And then Jason began to remember. Emily often had a runny nose, even in the summer. One day he came in and saw her arm hurt. He asked her what was wrong, and his wife said she was giving blood. But the young nurse could not immediately get into the vein, so now the hand is so ugly. The puzzle in the man's mind came together. Had he missed so much in his life? While he was setting up work issues, while he was having fun at parties, his wife, who disliked fuss and pretense, was so homesick that she had fallen into addiction. Emily always tried to remain optimistic, smiling, She did not emphasize the fact that she has a blind daughter and did everything to make sure that the girl lived a full life. But there was darkness in her soul, which she tried to drown out with various substances. It must be said that Jason himself tried easy ways to relax, but quickly realized that it was not his. He wasn't drawn to alcohol either. Moreover, he saw perfectly well what people of his circle turned into when they started abusing alcohol. They fell from heights into the abyss. Some of them lost their whole fortunes. Others were still able to function, but they didn't look like themselves anymore. Jason thought for a moment. Turns out he'd lost his wife. How tragic. She didn't need much, just some of his time and attention. Then this disaster wouldn't have happened. Then she wouldn't have left. It's lucky Chloe's alive. It's scary to think what would have happened if Emily had suddenly wanted to take her daughter with her. Maybe that's what she'd wanted to do, but at the last moment something in her soul had shifted. When Jason arrived home, he tried to feed Chloe dinner, but she could only swallow yogurt. He put her to bed and forgot to remind her to brush her teeth. He didn't know where his daughter's pajamas were, what kind of pillow she liked to sleep on, or what kind of blanket she used. Jason knew almost nothing about his daughter, and he realized he had a lot to learn. But would he be able to handle a special needs child alone, much less a girl? But when he saw that his daughter was finally asleep, the man got up from the low stool he'd been sitting on beside her bed. He looked once again at her pretty face, then shifted his gaze to the snow-white guitar hanging on the wall in the same room, and sighing, stood for a moment and turned on the kettle to the minimum light. Then he walked out of the bedroom and closed the door behind him. Tomorrow, a new day and a whole new life awaited him and his daughter without their mother, without his wife, and without the reliable guardian angel who had always protected their family, but whose wings had suddenly broken. The prison gates, painted a dirty green, rumbled shut behind Elizabeth's back. Yesterday's prisoner was in no hurry to leave. She looked out at the May sun and smiled serenely. In her hand, she was carrying a small gym bag. In her pocket was money, barely enough to rent a corner in the dormitory. For 7 years, she had been turning the sewing machine handle, but she had never gotten rich. Elizabeth had no relatives and no friends. And how could she make friends with such an ugly scar across her face and such gray, gnarled teeth? People judge by appearances, and Elizabeth had her whole life imprinted on her face. Of course, 7 years ago wasn't so bad, except for the huge fresh scar on her face. But her teeth had deteriorated from poor nutrition, and her skin was gray and loose from disease. They wouldn't even take Elizabeth as a guitarist, so she had to take the unpleasant job. Let her sit on the back row of the girl on her balalaika, said the supervisor. But the attitude towards her daughter changed when she suddenly sang. She sang in such a way that all claims to her appearance instantly fell away. No one cared about the scar, because Elizabeth's voice was like breaking down the prison walls, helping her comrades to distract themselves from the harsh reality. It was a pity that the instrument Elizabeth played was left in prison. In parting, the woman played her favorite composition and, stroking the guitar on the lacquered body, said, "That's it. I am now a free bird, and you, friend, stay here in captivity." In response, the strings of the guitar tinkled pitifully, and Elizabeth, putting the instrument aside, left the assembly hall. Many sat and cried when it was time to say goodbye to the guitarist. After all, who else would sing so well for them live? Concerts were one of the few entertainments for the prisoners. We can only hope that some other artist will beat up her roommate and go to jail for a long time, becoming a local celebrity. And as in any detective story, Elizabeth had her envious friends who were rubbing their hands together, happy that now they and their talents would come to the forefront. But one thing the inmates were unanimous in envying was that her time in prison was coming to an end. How long had she waited for freedom? The will both terrified and beckoned her at the same time. How would she live? What would she do? Elizabeth decided not to think about it yet. First, she decided to at least take the first step, to walk down the road on her own, without an escort, without looking back at the prison gates. She gathered air into her lungs and took the first step, and then another and another. It was like plunging into icy water. The farther one walked, the easier it became. The first night, Elizabeth had to spend the night at the train station because she didn't pass the face control at the hostel. People looked at her sideways, avoided her, and Elizabeth wanted to go back to prison for the first time. Yeah, it's hard out there. Sometimes it's depressing and hopeless. but she had her guitar there. Their Elizabeth was her own, and here she was a stranger, unwanted. The will doesn't welcome her, doesn't want to accept her. Having bought a cake and tea, Elizabeth ate furtively, as if she were stealing. She was ashamed of her appearance, especially when she saw prosperous women around her in beautiful clothes with beautiful hairstyles. Perhaps the average person would say that they were just ordinary women, and that their clothes were cheap and their hairstyles were so bad. But they seemed to Elizabeth a model of prosperity. They had a roof over their heads, an apartment or a house. And maybe they didn't have the rich furnishings of their homes. But these women had something that seemed incredibly valuable to Elizabeth: a soft bed, a private bathroom, the ability to drink coffee in the morning and look out the window. And they could also walk up to the cashier, ask for a ticket, and no one would look at them askew, with prejudice. No one will question whether to let them into the entryway. They could walk into a store with beautiful clothes, and even if they didn't buy anything, they wouldn't be chased out. Elizabeth was aware of her dire situation, but it wasn't all bad. A comrade had given her a note with her sister's address and name. Don't worry, she won't take much, but at her in the open air you'll have time for that. Eat, get yourself cleaned up, then you're going to get a job. For the ex-convict it was ideal, because she had no one. Her sister lived in another city, so Elizabeth did not immediately decide to leave. She did not know this city at all, where she would go to the metropolis. It was very frightening. But after wandering a little more in the local streets and receiving refusals, even from the owners of old private houses, on which hung an ad room for rent inexpensive, Elizabeth decided that it was necessary to leave, or she would have to beg for alms. Having gone through another stage of humiliation while buying a ticket and boarding the train, Elizabeth took her seat by the toilet, huddled in a corner, and stared out the window with a large woolen shawl. The measured clatter of the wheels soothed the woman and distracted her from her anxious thoughts. It suddenly seemed to her that the train was taking her away from the terrible, gloomy past to a bright, happy future. Greening trees whizzed past. The roadsides were green, emerald from the grass, which had not yet had time to fade from dust and summer heat. How good it is. Elizabeth thought and smiled unabashedly. The train ride had been the happiest moment of Elizabeth's life in years, and the woman was scared to leave the carriage when the train arrived at the station. Taking a deep breath, she stood up, pulled her shawl over her head, and tried to tie it so that the scar would not be visible. Then she slouched down, shrunk into a ball, and headed for the exit. "Stand back." Old woman, a middle-aged man, threw her angrily when Elizabeth hesitated on the platform and prevented him from passing. "I'm not an old woman," Benny whispered confusedly when the man was already far away. This abundance of people of different sexes and ages, the hustle and bustle around them, and the incessant clamor frightened Elizabeth. A daze came over her, and she felt an animal fear. It must be the way a dog feels when it has escaped from an evil master and finds itself in the center of the city. It seems to have broken free, but it is also frightened. At the same time, this place seemed surprisingly familiar to her. Of course, all train stations looked alike, but this one was special. Perhaps it was a sign that the city was showing her friendliness. Elizabeth imagined again, as she had on her first day of freedom, as if she were entering cold water, and took the first step. Then another, and then another down into the subway. She quickly figured out how to get through the turnstiles, how to find the right station. And that was surprising, because Elizabeth knew clearly that she had never been on the subway. She hadn't been in this city at all, but now she felt at home. The main thing was not to be chased away. Fortunately, no one was going to chase her away. True, they looked at her documents twice. Well, there's nothing wrong with her papers. You're welcome to look. 90th year of birth. You look older, lady. The clerk grinned and handed Elizabeth back her passport. It's been a hard life, the woman sighed and wandered away. As she rode in the train car, she even allowed herself to relax. There was no discomfort. Everything was her own. Such familiar déjà vu. When she got off the subway, Elizabeth took the streetcar. Here, too, she quickly learned where and how to get on. But from the streetcar, she had to walk for a long time to find the right house. It was an old 5-story building, still quite sturdy. But she didn't like the apartment she found. It was a dungeon. And you, Emily, I warned you, said the unpleasant woman who opened the door without saying hello. Elizabeth reread the note from her sister in Cincinnati and slipped it into the pocket of her dirty robe. "Well, come in." "What are you waiting for?" Rihanna said gruffly. Elizabeth timidly crossed the threshold and found herself in a narrow hallway littered with all sorts of junk. "Don't drop anything," the woman named Rihanna warned. "Go straight to the hall." The hall was what she pathetically called the only common room with shabby wallpaper. Tattered tulle hung from the dirty windows. The ceiling, yellowed by tobacco smoke, was covered with dirty dark wallpaper with rusty stains. Near the window stood an old, once lacquered table, on which cigarette butts were mercilessly stewed. The tabletop was littered with all sorts of things, including dirty dishes and leftovers with cigarette butts sticking out. There were dirty mattresses and blankets in the corners with cockroaches crawling past them. The room was so stuffy and stinky that Elizabeth almost threw up. "What are you fidgeting for?" "Give me the money for the night," Rihanna bellowed angrily, showing the disgusting stumps of her black teeth. I don't know," Elizabeth began. "Here she doesn't know. Well, go on then. The bums on the street with a face like that won't take you in for the night." Elizabeth sighed. She knew she had neglected her appearance. At least she still had her voice, though it wasn't as sonorous as it used to be. "Here," she said, holding out the bills to the hostess. "Welcome." The woman stretched out and quickly tucked the money into her pocket. "What were you in jail for?" "I'm a decent man. I don't take in just anyone." "You killed your roommate," Elizabeth sighed. "That's good for you. Let me go get a drink. We'll sit down and you can tell me all about it," Rihanna suggested. Elizabeth ignored her suggestion. "I have nothing to hide," the hostess shrugged and led her guest into the kitchen. Once inside, Elizabeth regretted giving her money away. She had never seen such a pigsty. Before prison, she had also lived in some kind of den, but she didn't remember it at all. Perhaps the alcohol and drugs had damaged her memory. Besides, Elizabeth had been beaten over the head by her own friends and drinking buddies. Maybe it was a good thing she couldn't remember anything, but the woman was certain she had never had such filth. She couldn't live in such conditions, even if she was perpetually drunk. There had clearly been a fire in the kitchen, put out in time. Some of the furniture and walls were black, sooty. Remnants of surviving curtains hung from the eaves. There were unwashed dishes and a thick layer of greasy dirt. "There's no water. They turned it off for non-payment," the landlady warned aggressively. "Where will we get it from?" "From the pump, honey." "Is the stand far away?" Elizabeth ventured to ask. "2 streets away," Rihanna replied grudgingly. "So, you need a well right under your nose." Rihanna's face was covered in new bright spots that looked frightening against her gray-green skin. "Does the gas work?" Elizabeth tried to turn the conversation, to which the landlady contorted a disgruntled face. "I have all the comforts of light and gas," she muttered with resentment in her voice. That's good already, Elizabeth thought. Only an eerie odor from somewhere to her left kept her uneasy. "Is there a restroom in there?" she asked, jabbing her finger at the door. "The bathroom," Rihanna replied defiantly. Barely had Elizabeth opened the door when she felt as if she'd been punched in the face with a fist. "Oh my God, what is this?" she exclaimed, gasping at the stench. "That, honey, is the restroom. A separate one, by the way." "Not like you're used to a shared one," Rihanna said. "I have my own apartment, by the way." "Why does it stink so bad?" Elizabeth couldn't stand it. "Because this toilet is a latrine," Rihanna shrugged nonchalantly. Elizabeth later learned that the toilet in this house doesn't work. For small needs, the owners go to the bathroom or the sink, and for large ones in bags, which are either thrown out of the window, or they remain lying on the dirty floor. And that, as it turned out, wasn't the worst of it. That same evening, Rihanna's drinking buddies came over to drink the money she had gotten from her tenants. Elizabeth was also invited to the table, but the woman huddled in a corner and only prayed that she was not touched. Fortunately, the alcoholics were not violent. They drank themselves unconscious and slept through the night. Elizabeth realized she couldn't take another day in that shelter. Scolding herself for giving the landlady the last of her money, she took her bag and left the apartment for good. The deposit she had given to the landlady had been drunk by the marginalized, and there was no one to claim the money back. But why was she so stupid? She had been fooled many times in prison, too. Once she was even beaten up. Good thing there were always serious women to protect the singer. Otherwise, she would have died there. But now she had to live alone in this city with no help, no friends, no money. She had some pennies left, but she couldn't rent a place to live on them, and she didn't want to go to an orphanage. More than anything else, Elizabeth was afraid of losing her documents, because that would mean the beginning of the end. Although she was already at the beginning of the end, the woman saw no light ahead of her. And okay, it was warm now, but what to do next? In the blink of an eye, the city went from friendly to hostile for the ex-convict. She had to sleep in train stations, in gazebos, in parks. Elizabeth didn't get enough sleep. Her bones ached from the hard benches. Then she decided to buy herself a sleeping bag. It would be easier. Surprisingly, when Elizabeth started using a sleeping bag, she got less complaints from random passers-by. Apparently, they thought she was a tourist, or an eccentric millionaire. Or maybe they just didn't associate a person with a sleeping bag with a homeless person. I still have to present him with a tent, Elizabeth joked to herself. The hobo was doing her best to avoid running into the police. But surprisingly, the police didn't even notice her, like a stray cat. The woman had no money for food. But she found out that once a day a charity organization gives out free hot lunches. She had to wait in line, but in the end, the soup and buckwheat porridge she received was a lifesaver. In addition, she learned that among the seemingly marginalized people there are quite decent and educated people. There are also old retired women whose relatives take away their pensions to the penny. These old ladies look nice because they are used to living decently in any conditions, such as their upbringing. They were very ashamed that they had to go for free food, because they worked all their lives and never asked anyone for a penny. But now they had to humiliate themselves. Elizabeth's heart shrank at this picture. She also met Justin, a philosopher in an old Soviet suit with a dirty shirt and a red Soviet cocked hat. Where'd he get one of those? Justin's face was soaked, but remarkably clear thinking and impeccable speech. Turns out he was a Marxist professor at the university when his major was abolished. He became a philosophy professor, then tried to work as a psychologist. But it was the bad 90s, when his salary was delayed for months. His wife couldn't stand it, took her son and left him for a lover. And he got drunk, first lost interest in life, then lost his home. But what Elizabeth liked best of all was Lavina, the dog lady. She wasn't homeless or unemployed. She lived in her own apartment with 3 small dogs of unknown breed. Lavina was a math major and earned money by tutoring and writing term papers. But she spent all the money she received on stray dogs, Lavina said, and she took them all to herself, and of course the neighbors are not happy. My 3 tails sometimes make such a scandal among themselves. It's horrible, but I feed the homeless dogs and cats and treat them. Sometimes I can't even buy myself a piece of bread. I give everything to the vet and still remain indebted to the veterinary clinic because a dog is now more expensive to cure than a person. That's why the lunches save me. But not only that, free lunches, as it turned out, were saving Lavina. She once confided in Elizabeth that she collected candy at the cemetery. Sometimes you just want sweets so badly. Blushing, the old woman confessed. I go there myself. I go to the cemetery and find a candy. I eat it. And with gratitude I bow to the graves and take a little. If flowers wilt or a vase falls, I pick them up and water them, if I see that they're drying out. Would you like me to take you with me next time? Elizabeth agreed. All her thoughts were on food. The woman was always hungry and longed for the time in prison when they had been fed 3 times a day. Now she had to beg at the market, where kind women gave her vegetables and diluted cookies. Elizabeth had originally gone to the market to get a job as something to do. She was allowed to pick over the fruit and was given the whole marriage for it. The next day she went to the market again and helped set up a tent for the egg vendors, for which she received a whole tray of broken eggs. It was these eggs that became the cement that cemented the friendship between Elizabeth and Avalanche, like in ancient times when egg whites were used to build temples that still stand today. That day Elizabeth approached Lavina in line and said, "You know, I got a tray of beaten eggs. I have absolutely nowhere to store them, and I can't cook them because my camping burner is out of gas and I don't have any money for a new canister. I'd like to give these eggs to you. Make scrambled eggs at home. Share with your pony-tailed pets. Avalanche nearly cried when Elizabeth handed her a tray of the valuable protein source. "Thank you so much," girl Lavina pronounced. "I don't usually do this, but I'll make an exception for you. I'm very afraid of strangers, even if they seem nice. But I'll invite you to my place nonetheless. Come and make eggs together in my kitchen. I have butter, I have salt, and I also have tea. Come along." Elizabeth did not refuse, and off they went. Lavina turned out to have a very modest dwelling, but pleasant despite the presence of 3 dogs. Sometimes the woman brought an animal, a cat or a dog, for foster care. So for such an occasion, there was a huge cage in the room. New animals should always be quarantined, she explained. They have a chain reaction to that, don't they? It'll spread to the others in no time. I won't be able to cure them then. Avalanche and Elizabeth made scrambled eggs and had a very good meal. Elizabeth did not linger because she could see that the old woman was uncomfortable having a stranger in her kitchen with such a disfigured face and past. So she chose to tactfully leave. The next time Elizabeth got some meat scraps and good vegetables. Once again, she and Lavina took to cooking in the kitchen. This time the landlady even offered Elizabeth to wash in her bathtub, a pleasure the poor tramp could not refuse. Gradually, the women's friendship became so strong that Lavina offered Elizabeth to stay with her for a while until she could find a job. Elizabeth appreciated the older woman's trust, but decided not to overstay her welcome. She knew she wouldn't be hired as a janitor either, so there was no chance of getting a job. Look, Lavina muttered to herself. It's already fall, and it's going to rain, then frost. You won't be able to stand it, you'll catch pneumonia, and it's a goner. Elizabeth considered agreeing to Lavina's proposal, but she didn't want to embarrass the kind woman who'd agreed to take her in like another stray dog she felt unbearably sorry for. Deciding to think about Lavina's offer in peace, Elizabeth went to the cemetery, hoping to find some cookies. She wandered among the graves, immersed in her reasoning, weighing the pros and cons, not forgetting to look for candy left on the graves. It was September. The weather was amazing, but the scent of fall was already present. The trees were dropping their first yellow leaves, and golden flecks like coins were already peeking through the green crown. Suddenly Elizabeth heard crying. Either a child's or a woman's. That's normal. In the cemetery, apparently someone was mourning a relative. But as she got closer, she saw a girl in a school uniform. The poor girl was squatting and crying bitterly. Her sixth sense told Elizabeth that the girl wasn't crying for a relative or a dead boyfriend or friend. "What's wrong?" Elizabeth asked. The girl raised her head and twirled it around in confusion. "Who's there?" the girl asked. "Can't you see me?" Elizabeth was surprised and faltered. She realized that the stylish, tinted glasses on the girl's face were not to protect her from the sun or to hide her tears. "I can't see anything," the girl admitted. "I'm completely blind." This caused her to burst into tears even more. Elizabeth examined the unfortunate girl from head to toe. She looked about 15, very pretty long hair, expensive school uniform, leather shoes. Just a picture. "How did you end up here?" Elizabeth asked politely. "I think my friends played a trick on me," she replied. "They said we were going on a picnic. After school, we got into the car that Ben, my classmate, borrowed from my father. They ended up driving me here, to the cemetery. They took my backpack and my phone and ran away. They didn't even tell me it was a cemetery. I'm not stupid and I know the coldness of gravestones. When we walked here, I seemed to remember how many steps we took and where we turned. But when I tried to get out of the cemetery, I realized that I'd gotten confused and lost. They were leading me by the hands. If I had touched the tombstones as we walked, I definitely wouldn't have gotten lost. But I had no idea I was in a cemetery," said the girl and burst into tears again. "Don't cry, I'll take you home," Elizabeth said, deciding to address the girl on a first-name basis. "What's your name and where do you live?" "My name is Chloe," the girl said. That name made Elizabeth's heart throb. "What a beautiful name," she said. "Did your mother call you that?" "Yes," said the girl, rising and wiping away her tears. "My mother. But she's long gone. I have only my father and stepmother." I'm sorry, Elizabeth sighed, and taking the girl by the arm, led her to the exit. Thank you. You are so good, I trust you completely. And your voice is so familiar. I'm sure you won't deceive me, won't lead me to a dangerous place, said the schoolgirl sincerely. She was very curious and asked Elizabeth the whole story of her life. Bunny. I had nothing to hide, but I didn't have much to tell either, she sighed. They say I killed my roommate. Wow. Did he beat you? Asked Chloe. I do not remember. I don't remember him at all, Elizabeth answered. It's like the past has been erased. They say that in my past life I drank a lot, and also hit me on the head. Hence the memory lapses. Elizabeth led the girl out of the cemetery but decided to finish the job and bring her home. It turned out that their way lies in an elite settlement, and if it were not for Chloe, whom the guards knew well, the vagrant Elizabeth would definitely not be allowed on the territory. The house where Chloe lived was large and stunningly beautiful. Elizabeth opened the gate by a young guard whose name, as it turned out, was Ben. Good afternoon, Chloe. He politely greeted the girl. And who are you with? This is my savior, answered the schoolgirl. I am very indebted to her, so now we are coming to lunch with me. As you say, Chloe nodded the guard and gave way to Elizabeth. The young mistress confidently led Elizabeth through her possessions, and the woman noted that, despite her lack of sight, the girl navigated freely through the house, so luxurious that Elizabeth was breathless. She also moved freely, stepping over thresholds where necessary, going around furniture, and even up and down the stairs with ease. Elizabeth thought for a second that Chloe was playing a trick on her, and she wasn't blind at all. What do you mean? I know every corner of this place. My dad started building this house when my mom was a kid. He dreamed of us all living here, so he was very sad when she didn't get to see the fruits of his labor. In general, I navigate very well in a familiar space. I even go to a school for healthy children. Of course, it is a private school, so I have a special teacher who helps me to digest the material. And I have special textbooks, printed in Braille. But in an unfamiliar place, I am often helpless. It turned out that the house has a housekeeper, a maid, a personal cook, and a gardener. But despite the abundance of service personnel, the girl did not give the impression of a spoiled child. Young rich woman was very caring and was very concerned that the guest was comfortable in her home. The first thing she did was to feed Elizabeth to her heart's content, ordering her to set the table in the dining room. Then she asked the maid to help her guest from the bathroom, give her a clean towel and robe, and show her what and how to turn on. The maid performed all the errands. But the housekeeper did not like the liberties that the young mistress allowed herself, so she called Chloe's stepmother, Casey, who at that moment was in the beauty salon. She even had to give up the last procedure to rush home. What? Casey was outraged. Chloe brought home a vagrant? It's not a tramp, but my friend, and she's staying here, said the girl firmly. Are you out of your mind? Shouted the stepmother, looking disdainfully at Elizabeth, who even after a shower looked dismal. No, I'm not. She's my savior. And if you don't like something, call your father. All right, Casey nodded and dialed her husband's number. Hello, Jason. Can you imagine what your daughter is doing? After briefly summarizing the situation, the woman listened to her husband's reaction and handed the phone to her stepdaughter. Here, he wants to talk to you. Yes, Daddy? No, I want her to stay. Yes, I agree. We could just give her money and rent an apartment, but we can't help her with that. Dad, we need her to stay with us. I don't know. Let her be my nurse. I'm an invalid, in case you've forgotten. Stay out of it, Dad. Imagine what it would be like if some alcoholic found me in this cemetery, or if I was attacked by a maniac. Okay, thank you, Daddy, I love you. With a victorious look on her face, the girl returned the phone to her stepmother. Here you go. I've settled everything with my father. Elizabeth is staying, and it's my responsibility. She waved to her new caregiver and led her to her room. This is so embarrassing, Elizabeth said. Her cheeks flamed with shame. Don't worry, Casey only looks nervous, but she's actually a good woman. We have a cool relationship with her, but the main thing is that she suits Daddy. He's had women like that before her. Oh, I hate to think about it. Excuse me, where am I going to sleep? Elizabeth asked, amazed at her own impudence. She was too embarrassed to stay at Lavina's house so as not to make her uncomfortable, but she wanted to linger in this house. And not just because it reminded her of a palace. She just didn't want to leave that sweet blind girl. Wait, she heard Casey shouting from downstairs. When my father comes back and sees this beauty, his hair will stand on end. Don't pay attention, Chloe waved her hand. Dad will be back in a week. During this time, she will get used to you and will not perform. By the way, you know my father is a famous producer, Jason Riley. No, I haven't heard that. Oh, well. By the way, you can sleep in the guest room next to mine. I'll show you. Chloe opened the door, and Elizabeth found herself in teenage girl heaven. It wasn't a little princess's pink room, all in ruffles and bows, with lots of dolls. This was a girl's room, a very young girl's room indeed, but a girl nonetheless. Elizabeth entered Chloe's room. The colors were pastel, calm. The furniture was expensive, light-colored, a little pretentious. The main place was occupied by a huge high bed, on which it was possible to arrange a whole disco in pajamas. The source of light was a huge window. It was slightly open, and the curtains swayed in the light breeze. It's so nice, Elizabeth said and fell on the bed without asking permission. And Chloe fell down beside her. Yes, it's nice, she nodded. Sorry for the question. Why do you need garlands on the walls, posters? You can't see it, can you? Elizabeth realized her tactlessness. Is it for girlfriends? Chloe answered sadly. We used to gather at my place, jumping on the bed, throwing ice cream, even drinking cider. But after today, I see that I have no girlfriends. They're the ones who got me into this insidious prank. My poor girl, said Elizabeth and drew Chloe to herself to hug, snuggled in the arms of a new acquaintance. You feel so good, so warm, and your voice is just like Mama's, only it doesn't smell as much, the girl said, apologizing. Mom always smelled like expensive perfume. But still, I'm sure you're very pretty. Elizabeth smiled and stroked the girl's head. You should see my face with the scar. My teeth. You wouldn't talk like that. I might have. I'm glad I can't see. But we blind men look with our hearts, and I can see that you are a very good man. Beautiful souls. Chloe felt that she was about to cry. Elizabeth tried to distract her. I see a lovely white guitar. I've never seen one of those before. Will you let me play it? No, Chloe answered. And please don't touch it, okay? Of course, I'm sorry, Elizabeth hurriedly apologized. It's okay. It's not your fault. It's just that it's Mom's guitar. The memory of it is her special thing, you know. I understand. And I'm sorry again, Elizabeth said quietly. Do you know how to play? She tried to change the subject. Yes, and I sing well, bragged the woman. Well, then I'll play the guitar for you and you'll play for me, Chloe smiled. Of course, Elizabeth smiled and stroked the girl's head again. In the role of a caregiver for Elizabeth, practically nothing had to be done. Her ward was completely independent. Sometimes she needed a little help, but that couldn't even be called labor. Rather, Elizabeth lived in this family as a relative. A very poor and distant relative, who was not particularly welcomed by the other family members and servants. But they couldn't refuse her, either she had blood of her own after all. Elizabeth tried not to cross paths with Kayla, but it was not difficult. The rich producer's wife was always on the move, either on set or at a party, so the week went smoothly. Sometimes Elizabeth was a little bored because there was no one to socialize with. The servants didn't know how to treat her, so they shunned her. Chloe was at school either doing homework or tutoring. Elizabeth ended up eating, sleeping, walking around the garden, or watching TV in her room. In any case, it was a sin to complain about the share, because not so long ago she dreamed of at least a roof over her head, and now she lives in the palace, albeit on the bird's rights of a nurse. Her relationship with Chloe was perfect. Only once the girl got a little angry when Elizabeth could not resist and touched the strings of a snow-white guitar with her fingers. and the instrument immediately made a rapturous sound. "Elizabeth, you and I had a deal. It's not like I'm asking for much." "Don't touch my mom's guitar," Chloe reacted sharply. I'm sorry. Elizabeth apologized. "I don't want to quarrel with you, but there are sacred things for me, and I ask you to respect that." Elizabeth vowed not to touch the guitar. But as you know, the stricter you are forbidden something, the sweeter the forbidden fruit. And one day when Chloe was at school, the servants went about their business, and the housekeeper was knitting in her room. Elizabeth had the nerve to come into the girls' room and take the guitar off the wall and play. What a pleasure it was to hold that noble instrument in her hands. She wanted to play just a little to close the gestalt, but the longer she held the instrument, the less she wanted to let it go. She decided to sing. She sang one romance, then another, and before she knew it, a model appeared before her eyes. The girl's face was twisted with anger. I begged you not to touch my mom's guitar," screamed the schoolgirl. I'm sorry. And the woman began to apologize hastily. She was so frightened by her young friend's anger that she didn't notice the man standing behind her. It was Jason. He had returned from a business trip and had taken his daughter out of class early to spend more time with her. Raising her eyes to the stern man, Elizabeth whispered, "Please don't be angry. I couldn't help myself. I will never again." Instead of answering, the man began to move slowly towards Elizabeth and kneeling down in front of her. Raising his trembling hands to the woman's disfigured face, he touched her skin and said softly, "Lord, great is thou." Elizabeth opened her mouth in surprise. Chloe froze, not realizing what was happening. Jason wrapped his arms around his head and sobbed loudly. Later, Jason said his heart sank when he heard his dead wife's voice coming from behind the door of his daughter's room. But when he walked in and saw Emily disfigured, albeit oblivious to him, he felt such an explosion of emotion inside that he nearly exploded into atoms. That day he had driven the unhappy woman to hysterics, trying to get her to remember anything at all. He showed her pictures of her little daughter, and she admitted that she had seen this little girl in her dreams. He had to turn to psychiatrists, hypnotists, and other specialists who work with people who have damaged memories. Chloe could not believe her happiness. Was her mommy really alive? On Sunday, Emily was shown her photos, things from her former life, and gradually she began to reconstruct the chain of events up to the day when she allegedly died. I was driving. Chloe was asleep in the back seat with her headphones on. Suddenly, I saw an unkempt, disheveled girl kneeling on the side of the road, begging for help. I drove by at first, afraid to stop, but there were hardly any cars on that highway, so I decided to show mercy. Who else but me? I went back, got out of the car, but as soon as I approached the girl, I got something heavy on the head. I woke up in the woods. The girl was next to me in my clothes, and I was naked. She was cursing, calling me a rich girl. I grabbed a stick from the ground and hit her. We started fighting. Finally, she left this scar on my face and ran away, and I couldn't get up. I fainted a few times, but eventually I regained my strength. I got dressed and walked towards the highway. I couldn't think straight. I don't remember anything else. Flashes, police, hospital, court, jail. I don't remember much about the first year. The rest of the years are a little better. Jason made the investigators bring up the case files and conduct all the necessary examinations, including exhumation. He was well aware that in the grave, which he and his daughter had been caring for all these years, lay not his wife. But for the sake of order, everything had to be checked. When all the inquiries were over, the investigator told Jason that it was likely that the woman who had attacked Emily hadn't noticed at first that there was a girl sleeping in the back seat. She drove for several kilometers, and when she discovered the child, she simply pulled her out of the car and left her on the side of the road. The blind girl passed without realizing anything. Outwardly, Emily and her attacker, whose name was Elizabeth, were similar, though Elizabeth was younger. But because of the scar on her face, the bruises, and the negligence of the police, no one suspected that Emily had someone else's ID, and that she was not a wanted killer at all, but a victim of a crime. When the drug addict threw away her clothes and changed into Emily's, she left her passport in her pocket. But she wasn't likely to go back for it because she was on the run. Killed her roommate in a very brutal way. Emily, who had forgotten everything due to stress and multiple concussions, didn't even mind that she wasn't Elizabeth. The police wanted to close the case as quickly as possible, so the unfortunate woman was sent to jail without any special proceedings. Well, Jason kept the corpse of the sociopathic woman who had ruined the lives of his wife, his daughter, and himself. Most likely she was going to escape, but she lost control of the car and died. No one will ever know. It took a long time to help Emily get back to normal. Jason and Chloe surrounded the woman with incredible care. The producer paid the returned wife the best treatment, expensive plastic surgeries, dentist, turning her into a real star. "How beautiful you are. We are in admiration," he said. Emily didn't recognize herself. What happiness that this ugly scar is no longer, that her smile does not cause squeamishness in others, that the skin is no longer torn and smooth. Everyone was happy about Emily's miraculous return, except Kayla, who wandered around the house like a shadow, always crying. One day Emily invited Jason and Kayla over for a conversation and said, "Jason, I'm very grateful to you for everything you've done for me, for raising such a wonderful daughter while I was away. But you have to admit, our marriage was broken before all of this happened. Yes, we've been through a lot together. But I'd like to set the record straight. You're married to Kayla? She's been there for you in times of need. She's been your homemaker. I'm your past. We'll always be close because we're the parents of a wonderful little girl. But I'd like to set the record straight about our relationship. I'm sorry, but I'll go my own way. And you and Kayla have a separate road of life that I wish you could travel together, hand in hand." Jason waved away a tear. Kayla threw herself around Emily's neck and burst into loud tears. "I'm sorry I thought badly of you. I was sure you were going to take my husband away from me," the woman wailed. But Emily wasn't going to go back to the past. She lived in her ex-husband's house for a while and then moved into the apartment he'd bought for her. Madison was now living in 2 homes, one at her mother's house and one at her father's. And she was fine with that, despite Jason's entreaties. Emily refused to pursue a singing career, though there were prospects, especially given her amazing story. But she'd had enough of the many talk shows and interviews that had earned her a good living, but which had frayed her nerves. "No, I'd had enough of being popular." Emily decided and began to realize the idea, which was firmly planted in her head when she was homeless. Emily started her own foundation and began to help those in need. She also organized free lunches, medical, psychological, and social assistance to those in need. But first of all, she helped those who did not let her go crazy. During her homeless life, she closed all of Lavina's debts at clinics and helped her open her own shelter. Lavina was now able to receive official help from charitable organizations, and including ordinary people who trusted the official shelter more than an individual, animal advocates, and were more willing to donate. It took Emily a long time to find Justin. It turned out that the philosopher almost gave his soul to God when he was beaten by aggressive teenagers. Justin lay in the hospital, alone and forgotten. And Emily made a lot of effort to put the man on his feet, and then rented an apartment for him, cleaned him up, took him to the hairdresser, put his teeth in, and bought clothes. Then she helped him get a job at the college as a philosophy teacher. "You shouldn't have. He'll start singing again," people told her. But Emily didn't listen. She knew that a person should be given a chance, and thanks to her philosopher, at least in his old age, began to lead a decent life. Emily also helped old women who were abused by their relatives. She spoke to some of them with the word of the law, and some understood only the language of force. Therefore, the benefactor did not hesitate to hire people from the criminal world, who quickly explained to the insolent relatives that the old people should be taken care of, not the last pennies from them to take away. Later, together with her daughter, Emily opened a center for the blind, where children could come, with whom teachers were engaged, and adults who needed any kind of help. Madison enjoyed working at the center in her spare time and was incredibly proud of her mother. Emily was proud of herself, too. She was happy to be living a new life, to feel needed by the world. She had lost a whole 7 years that had fallen out of her life. So Emily hurried to live, making every day full, compensating for the years stolen from her. As for personal happiness, Emily promised herself that she would definitely look into the matter. She was sure her king of princes, and she is already grown up, will certainly find her. The main thing is not to give away on trifles.
Hi. Someone tapped her just below her back. At that moment, she was standing in the store, picking out groceries. Hi, she turned slightly, not even noticing who was saying hello to her. The young man walked past. Selena continued to pick out her groceries. So if I want to make a pizza, I need to buy more sausage and cheese. She spoke out loud so as not to forget anything. And when all the things she needed were stacked in the basket, she went to the juice shelf. At that moment, she wondered who it was that could behave so impudently. Look back, there was no one around. She went into another hall. She saw that young man. She noticed him because he was wearing a bright orange jacket, but she didn't recognize him. The interest was already so strong that Selena decided to approach him. He was looking at various cans of beer, apparently wanting to heat up his evening. When the girl got close to him, she couldn't believe her eyes. It was Alexander. Alexander was her neighbor. For a few minutes, Selena just stood there looking at him, a smile on her face. Probably he felt that look, turned around. Alexander, hello, she said cheerfully. I thought we already said hello. He did not understand. Yes, when? She was happy as if she had met a man on a desert island. Like when 2 minutes ago I approached you. He continued to make his choice. Alexander, I didn't recognize you. I thought who could touch me so brazenly, Selena kept saying. And what, you recognize who? He was indifferent. Well, what are you like? You're not happy. How many years we haven't seen you? A lot. She was ready to throw the basket and just disgorge him. Why are you so happy? He was still serious. Oh my gosh. But if you don't want to socialize, I'll go. But know that I was very happy to see you. She wanted to turn around, but he stopped her. Where to? He held her hand. To the checkout, she answered calmly, realizing that time had passed. And now this was not the man she had once known. Wait a minute, what's your offense? He looked at her the way he had once looked at her before. Selena remembered everything. She just couldn't help but smile. This was Alexander, the one she had so much in common with. They went to the register together, paid, and left the store. What are you doing here? He asked her. I live, she answered, not knowing what else to say. You were leaving, he wondered. She had left and come back. Celine didn't know if she was doing the right thing standing there talking to him. Okay, I'm sorry for reacting to your joy like that, but I'm glad to see you too, he told her. And you know what? Let's go visit me. Selena felt herself starting to get flirty with him. And let's go, he said calmly. They walked together to her house. He took the package from her hands. What was going on inside her at that moment cannot be described in words. Some kind of awe, tenderness, and at the same time, everything was seething, incomprehensible. They came to the entrance. She opened the door, went up to the floor, entered the apartment. Oh, what's going on here? He was immediately surprised to see various construction materials in the corridor, broken doors, plastered walls. Don't mind me. I've been working on it for a couple of months. I can't finish it, she said. If you lived with me, it wouldn't be like this, he said, and shook his head. Would it have been done already? She said with a grin. Of course, I'm a man. I have hands and they grow from the right place. Without taking off his shoes, he followed her into the kitchen. Here, only here is a place where you can sit, and here I sleep. She pointed to the bed, which stood in the corner. And when it's over, he asked. I don't know, there's still a lot of small work to do, Selena sighed, because she was really tired of living like this. Like what? He asked. The baseboards need tearing off, she said. I could do it right now, but unfortunately, there were no tools in Selena's house. Alexander promised he would come the next day and do it. That was very nice to hear because it was unknown when the workers would arrive. While he walked around the apartment and looked at everything that was there, Selena put the pizza in the oven as she wanted. There were glasses on the table, and she pulled out the wine. Are you trying to get me drunk on wine? He asked. Why? She looked surprised. No, I have my own. He took a beer out of the bag. Well, as you wish, she shrugged and sat down at the table. And what smells so good? Asked the guest. I put the pizza in the oven. She looked through the glass. You are also a good hostess, he told her. Alexander, enough, let's talk about who, where, what, she told him. As I lived here, so I live and work. What else to say? He looked at her. This look gave Selena goosebumps. What about your wife, your kids? She asked him. You remember Amy? She was divorced. He stopped talking and lowered his eyes. Was it a tough divorce? She asked him. No, he didn't say anything. Did she not let him see the baby? Selena remembered that when they were married, Amy was already pregnant. Don't ask about that, he asked. Okay, the girl thought, it's not that simple. She opened the oven, checking to see if the pizza was burnt. At that moment, Alexander stood up, walked over to her, took her hand. What are you doing? She turned to him, smiling. Yes, Amy and I divorced a long time ago, and as you know, we had a daughter, but she died recently. He held Selena's hands, lowered his head, and did not look at her. Oh, I'm so sorry, said the girl. And why? She looked up at him. Crashed her car. At this point, a stingy male tear rolled down his cheek. Shit, Alexander. She hugged him. How many years have passed? You can imagine that when they first met, they were so few years old, and now they sat down at the table again, not opposite each other, but next to each other. I always remembered you. He put his hand on her knee. And you, she deliberately did not turn to him, so as not to look him in the eye. When I saw you in the store, I wanted to come over. He took his glass. And before, that did not want to approach, laughed the girl. I have not seen you before. He put his head on her shoulder and gently touched her cheek with his lips. Alexander, don't, she pulled away from him. Why? He asked quietly in her ear. I'm afraid of you, she honestly admitted. What are you surprised, Alexander? No, I'm not afraid of you physically, I'm afraid of you morally. You're about to lure me again and then dump me. She knew him very well. Celine, he pulled her against him the way he had done before. She gasped at this tenderness, but she couldn't do anything because there really was some fear inside. You do realize, don't you, that this love of ours will never end? It was once and for life, he whispered in her ear. Alexander, we are adults. We should understand everything. She turned to him. At that moment, he started kissing her, and she couldn't resist. She answered his kiss. I can't live without you, he told her. And I don't believe you, she answered. They were lying in bed together. The pizza was getting cold on the table. Wine and beer were still poured in glasses. They didn't need anything but themselves right now. And you're still the same, he told her. And you're not, she turned away, now lying back and smiling. Have you gotten old? Alexander asked. Yeah, she laughed and turned to him. What was happening between them now could not be described in words. It was already just such a connection, which is inexplicable and intangible. Selena, she woke up to whispers in the morning. Alexander, did you and I fall asleep? She said in a sleepy voice without opening her eyes. I think we were. He kissed her. Today there was no need to go anywhere, so the girl was in no hurry. Why aren't you going home? She asked him. I don't want to, he answered her. Why don't you want to? She was lying there with her eyes closed, pressed against him. I don't want to let you go. He pressed her even tighter against him. Alexander, is it all true? Selena didn't believe it could be. What do you think? He whispered in her ear. I don't know. She really didn't know that. When it was already lunchtime, they had to get up, if only to have coffee. Do you want some? She pointed to the can. Yep, Alexander smiled. 1.5 spoonfuls of coffee and the same amount of sugar. She asked him. Do you remember? He stretched out. Of course, how could I forget? She poured the coffee into the mug. The sugar was more difficult because it was refined sugar. She added 1 cube, but with the second she had to labor to somehow saw half off with a knife. What are you doing there? He saw Selena tense up. Half sugar, she laughed and showed him the uneven lump. Well, you're kidding. You could have thrown in 2 or 1 would have sufficed. He got off the bed and walked over to her, hugging her from behind. I want to make you feel good, she said honestly. They heated up last night's pizza and sat down at the table, drinking coffee. Selena went to wash her face. Alexander followed her. Can I have a moment of privacy? She turned to him. No, again he put his arms around her and pulled her against him. I don't want to let you go for a minute. Now she pushed him out the door. After she washed her face, came and sat down next to him, she saw that Alexander was pensive. What are you thinking? She pressed against his cheek. About you? He raised his eyes. And what? She stopped talking. Nothing, he told her, stood up, went to the stove, poured water into his mug again. The kettle was probably already cold. She went there too to help him. "Selena, are you alone?" he asked her because he had been thinking about it since yesterday. "No," she answered seriously. "I knew it." He put the kettle back on the stove. "Do you know with whom?" Her lips smiled slightly. "I don't want to know. Please don't say." Alexander waved his head and went to the table. "Fool, of course. I'm now alone, but with you." She kissed him on the cheek. "Why are you scaring me so much?" He seemed to exhale. "Is that what you've been thinking about all morning today?" She wanted to hug the man. "Maybe," he answered. "No, I'm alone," she thought for a moment. "But you said you're not now." He put his arms around her, pulled her to him, and started kissing her again. They spent the rest of the day in bed, and when it was already deep into the night, Alexander burrowed into her hair and said he had to leave. "Wait at least until morning," she pleaded. "I have to go to work in the morning, so I need to sleep and be awake, and I can't do that with you." He got up and started to get dressed. She looked at this man and realized that he was right when he talked about love. "Will you come?" she asked. "What do you think?" He stopped, looked at her, and froze for a few seconds. "I think not." She didn't even think twice when she answered that question. "I don't promise that tomorrow or the day after tomorrow because it's a lot of work and I'm busy practically 24 hours a day, but closer to the weekend for sure." He leaned in, kissing her. At that moment, Selena stood up and followed him out into the hallway. "I'll be waiting." She ran her hand over his face. "I'll be there," he whispered to her. After that, he took his jacket and walked out of the door. The girl went to take a shower. Before, when she saw it in movies or heard someone singing in the shower, she'd always laughed at it. But today, she was singing by herself. She didn't care that the neighbors might hear it and think something of her. That when she went out, she just fell on her bed, lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking and remembering about Alexander, about her beloved. Could it all happen again because they say you can't step in the same river twice, she told herself. She was so happy. She wanted to sing, to smile, to go outside, to give something to someone. She closed her eyes. Selena was just happy in that moment. But when Friday came, Alexander was not there. The girl thought that maybe he meant Saturday when he said he would come closer to the weekend. For some reason, now it occurred to her that they hadn't even exchanged phone numbers, and she could have dialed him now. Maybe it was for the best, she said aloud, waved her hand and stopped waiting for him. After all, it had happened more than once. Selena was in ninth grade at the time. At that time, it was such a happy time. Girls 15 years old, boys, discos, meetings, parties. She didn't think about anything, just lived her happy girl life. "What's that rumbling noise?" Once asked her mother when she heard that from the stairwell, loud voices and blows. "I don't know," replied her daughter. "Selena, well, look through the peephole," her mom told her. "It looks like someone is moving in." She looked there. "That's it. Our quiet life is over. Now the neighbors will come and it will begin," smiled the woman. The apartment next door had been empty for a long time, and since the house was very audible, it was clear that the neighbors would not sit in silence. They would start talking again. Music, it was already checked when the previous tenants lived here. "Mom, can I go get some bread?" Selena told her. "There's bread." She looked at her. "Well, for milk or whatever else is necessary. Just to the store." I couldn't wait for the girl to leave the apartment and see who will live in the next apartment. "I see, for money, buy some vegetables and something for yourself." Her mother was not stupid and understood what the girl needed. Selena left the apartment. At that moment, two young guys were dragging a sofa. "Hello, are you guys moving into this apartment?" Selena pointed to the door. "Yep," nodded one of them with his head. They stopped on the steps to take a break. "I see, so we'll be neighbors," she said cheerfully. She couldn't get through because all the space was taken up by the couch. "I'm Alexander, and this is my friend John," said one of the guys. He was smiling. "And I'm Selena," she said. After the young men dragged the couch in, Selena went downstairs. She quickly went to the store. When she returned, she saw that the car wasn't fully unloaded yet and the guys were gone. She purposely slowed her gait to wait for them to come out of the driveway. And there they were. "Wow, how much stuff you have." She pointed at the car. "Yes, there's some." Alexander was still as cheerful as ever. "Well, goodbye," she smiled, waved her hand and went into the entrance. So, who's coming in? Her mother met her in the hallway. Some young guy. Selena shrugged her shoulders as if she didn't care. She went to her room. She couldn't wait to go out tonight and tell her friends. In the kitchen, her mother cooked something, and then she was going to leave. "Where are you going?" the girl asked her. "I'm going to throw out the trash in Leslie," she said about her friend who lived in the next house. "All right, let me go out soon too," her daughter told her. Her mother left and Selena started putting on her makeup and getting ready to meet her friends. She hadn't had a chance to leave yet when her mother came back. "Why are you looking at me like that?" her daughter asked her. "What did you tell me today?" "Some young guy's coming over. He's young to me, but to you he's old." She took off her shoes. "How old is he?" The girl was indignant. "Well, about 10 years older than you for sure." The mother went into the room. Selena at this moment. Selena jumped out of the apartment. When she met with her girlfriend, she spent the whole evening telling her about Alexander, what he was like, that he was going to live near her now. "You should have seen him," she said with a gasp to her friend. "Oh, Selena, enough with your neighbor," Hannah told her, because she was not interested. After that, no matter how many times Selena went to the store, the street, or anywhere else, she never once met Alexander. It wasn't that it was a shame, but she wouldn't have minded seeing him. "Is your mother going to let you go to the disco tonight?" Hannah asked. "Why such questions? Has she ever not let me go?" Selena didn't understand. "Well, no, just the day before yesterday we came late. You said she was swearing," shrugged the girl. "I think it'll be fine." Selena was always cheerful and upbeat. "That's it, then we'll meet there as well." They went home after school. In the evening, as on other weekends, they met, chatted a little, and went to the disco. There they danced, both fast and slow dances. And so, when everyone gathered in the foyer to hang out some more after the disco, a guy approached Hannah. Selena realized that today they would go out not together with her friend, but with 3 of them, and with her new boyfriend. The girl was a little hurt that she would be alone, but no one was thinking about that right now. When they came out, Hannah gave all her attention to the young man. She was talking to him. They were making out, kissing, laughing, as if Selena wasn't even with them. "Okay, I'm going home," she said. "No offense," Hannah turned to her. No, I'm not." Even though it wasn't true, she couldn't say it any other way. Through the deserted streets, Celine walked alone, and just as she turned into her yard, she saw a familiar figure. It was Alexander, but they weren't so familiar with him that she could so easily approach him, say something. To be honest, she couldn't even say hello to him because she was shy. Alexander at that moment also noticed his neighbor. "Selena," he shouted at her. "Yes," turned the girl, cheeks burning. Inside, everything was shaking. She could not even say a word because she was afraid that her voice would shake. "Are you going home?" he asked her. "Yes," she said again, and thought to herself that she could have said something else. "Do you want to go for a little walk?" Alexander asked. Come on, she couldn't believe this was really happening. She'd been looking for a meeting with him for so long. And now, not only had they met, but he called her for a walk. "Let's go sit on the bench over there." When they reached the park, he showed her. "Let's go." Today, she was willing to do anything just to be near him. Alexander had his guitar with him. He set it next to a bench. They sat down. The guy began to ask what, how, where she studied, how long she had been living in this apartment, some common phrases. "Do you sing?" she asked him off key. Well, as you can see, he looked at the guitar. And now, she looked at him and immediately turned away because she was shy. "Do you want me to sing to you?" he asked her. "If you want." She still didn't look up. Alexander took the guitar. He started to sing some song. And as it happens with all young lovers, all the words in the song Selena transferred to herself. And Alexander tried, pulling something about love, about unhappy love. "Beautiful," Selena said when he finished. "Do you want me to sing more?" he asked her. "I do," she answered honestly, and it was true. The guy started singing a song that said that he had been alone for so long, hadn't met the one and only one he would love yet. And then recently a girl appeared on the horizon. When he looked into her eyes, he realized that she was his in everything. And of course, Selena thought the guy in the song was Alexander and the girl was her. The girl just sat there and smiled. It was fall outside, with yellow leaves on the ground, and now here, Late at night, in the park, where there was no one, these leaves, the bench, Alexander with a guitar, everything was so Poltitney. "Why are you so mysterious?" he asked. "No, I'm fine." She got even more embarrassed. Alexander moved closer, put his hand on her waist. At that moment, she turned around and he kissed her. Selena had kissed guys before, but never like he did now. "You're beautiful," he told her. "So are you," she told him, and then thought she must have said something stupid. "Do you want me to sing to you some more?" He realized that the girl was melting from his songs and from everything that was going on. "Aha," she nodded, and he sang again and again about love. "You're mine forever. I'll never leave you." Selena heard the words of the song, and then they were kissing again. "Should we go home?" she asked him when it was very late. The girl realized that her mother would scold her at home. "Let's go," he laughed. "Why are you laughing?" She didn't understand. Now anyone else would have offered to see her off, but realized that we live with you in adjacent apartments. And even if I didn't want to, I'd have to walk you out. He smiled again. "Yeah, funny, but..." She stopped talking. She wanted to say that if her mother saw them together, she probably wouldn't be happy, and then decided not to say it out loud. Alexander must have understood everything, because he didn't ask again. That evening they walked home. He held her hand. Everything was just as Selena had imagined she would someday have with a young man. They reached the driveway. He drew her to him, kissed her once more. "Will we meet up with you again?" he asked her. "Probably, but it still depends on you." She looked up at him. "Okay, I'll say it wrong then," he smiled. "Tomorrow you and I will meet here in the courtyard in the evening." He spoke so convincingly that the girl believed him. Good, and that was all the girl needed for her 15-year-old happiness. She walked into the house, took off her shoes, and her mom came out of the room. "Were you out with the neighbor?" she asked the girl. "Why do you think so?" Did not understand the daughter, how mom guessed. "Well, do I look like a fool? You came in and slammed the door at him," she mouthed. "And why can't we come from somewhere together, walk up the stairs, and go into our own apartment?" Selena didn't understand. "Oh, coincidences like that rarely happen." Her mother told her, and went to her room. Selena didn't argue with her, went to her room. She lay down on the couch, hugged her favorite bear, and began to remember how tonight had gone. She realized that her parents would never let her date Alexander while she was in school. She had paid attention to him once when he was moving in, so that's why her mother was thinking about it now. Tonight, she didn't even go to wash her face. She fell asleep like that. She had to go to school in the morning, and she was getting ready in the evening. And even though the girls were calling to go out, Selena didn't go anywhere. She went out to the courtyard and sat at a table. Selena waited for Alexander, for he had told her yesterday that they would meet here in the evening. Time went by very slowly. It was 8:00 p.m., 9:00 p.m., and he was still gone. "Why are you sitting here?" She heard the voice of her mother, who came out of the entrance. "Nothing, just so I can't sit here." She was afraid that her mom would think something wrong. "Well, usually you and the girls go out somewhere, but today you settled right in the yard." Her mother suspected something again. "Hannah told us all to come over tonight, but she's staying late," she lied. "Okay." The mother looked at her one more time and went on her way. Alexander still hadn't come. "I see." She got up from the bench and headed for her entrance. She could have gone to where their company was meeting, but for some reason Selena didn't feel like it today, so she just walked home. She hadn't seen or heard from him for 3 days. And then when she got home from school, she saw him at the same table where she had waited for him a few days ago. "Selena, hi." He walked up to her. "Hi." She didn't want to show him she was offended or anything else she was thinking. "I'm sorry I didn't come over then." He took her hand. "Yeah, it's okay," she replied simply. "Shall we go for a walk?" he asked. Right now, she realized it's still another day. "If you don't want to, we can tonight." He looked into her eyes. "No, let's go right now," she agreed, because she thought if he said tonight, then he might not come again. And again they walked. Alexander said something, pressed her to him, kissed her, and Selena just melted from his embrace. "Come to me on Friday," he told her. "What's going to happen?" She wanted to know. "My friends and I will get together. Sit. I'll introduce them to you," he began to tell her. Meanwhile, the girl was thinking about how she would leave her apartment and go into his. But that was not the most important thing, so she decided to think about it later. "What's on your mind?" he asked her. No, it was just that. Now she looked at him. For some reason, she felt like telling him about her mom not welcoming their connection at all. "But I can see that something is bothering you." He put his arm around her shoulders. "You know, the day you moved in and I saw you, I fell in love immediately," Selena began to say, and Alexander laughed. "That's your childish maximalism talking in you," he told her. "Well, let it be so. So when I saw you, then looked for a long time for meetings. My mother noticed all this, and now," she stopped. "And now she's telling you that I'm too old for you and you're still little and you can't come to me, right?" He took her face in his hands and kissed her. "Yes," she nodded, "but we'll figure something out." Alexander was sure of it. Of course, right now it seemed to the girl that she was willing to roll mountains for this man. At school, when she started to tell Hannah about her neighbor, she didn't even want to listen because it seemed that she didn't believe her friend. It turned out that she couldn't consult with her mom. Her friend didn't listen to her. She was on her own. On Friday, when she came from school, she hoped that her mother would not come until the evening, and her father never paid attention to where and when she went. But her mother did not live up to her expectations. "Okay, Mom, I'm off," she shouted from the hallway and left the apartment. Selena started downstairs, and with her back, she felt her mother's burning gaze through the peephole. The girl purposely tapped her heels louder so that she could hear that her daughter had definitely left the entrance. Downstairs, the girl slammed the door hard and sat down on the bench. She sat there for about 10 or 15 minutes, then very quietly opened the door, took off her heels, went up to her floor, and scratched at Alexander's door. "Ooh," he opened the door. "Quiet." She put her finger to her lips. "Ah, got it," he said in a whisper. Selena went in and just as quietly closed the door. Alexander led her into the room where her friends were already sitting around the table. He introduced her to everyone, and then they started drinking and eating. The guitar sounded many times that evening. Not only Alexander sang, his friends picked up. It was interesting and fun. Now it was necessary to go home, and so Selena also quietly went out as she came in, went down to the street, after immediately slamming the driveway door and loudly went upstairs. "Have you been to the neighbor's house today?" her mother asked her from the doorstep. "Mom, are you awake?" was very surprising to the girl because it was not the first time she went out and came back late. But before, her mother did not suspect her of anything and certainly never met her in the middle of the night. "I'm waiting for you in the corridor," stood the woman with her arms at her sides and looked at her daughter. "Well, here I am." Celine stared at her point blank. "Give me your hand," her mother said to her. "Why?" She didn't understand. Her mother took her hand in her own while looking Selena in the eye. "Where have you been?" she asked her again. "Mom, what's wrong? Tell me." The girl was tired of standing there. "Your hands are warm, even if you were coming from Hannah or from where you were sitting. It's not the month of May outside. Your hands wouldn't be so warm," the woman told her. What kind of interrogation? What kind of innuendo? Maybe they were in my pockets. Selena didn't know what else to say. She didn't even think her mother would touch her hands or anything like that. "Daughter, he's much older than you. If you start dating him, he'll just ruin your life," she told her. "Mom, let me handle this. If I start dating him, you'll be the first to know," she told her and went to her room. She'll sort it out herself. Shook her mother's head and went to bed. The next day, when Selena was coming back from school, she saw Leslie on the bench at the entrance. "Hi," she walked up to her. "Hi," Hannah told her. This girl was also a few years older than Selena. She was friends with Tom, who lived in the same house as Selena's grandmother. "What are you doing here?" the girl asked her. "Living," Hannah looked up at her. "I live here too, but I've never seen you here before," Hannah laughed. "We just rented an apartment in this building yesterday. Tom and I are going to live here now," she told her. "Wow, you're welcome to visit," smiled Selena, and thought that nothing would be a problem for their meetings with Alexander now, because she could go to Leslie's, and her mom would know it. In the evening, when they met, she told him everything. "So I know Leslie and Tom too," he told her. "So let's go visit them together then," Selena suggested, and they immediately went back to the entryway, up to the floor. Hannah was glad to have guests. Now every night they gathered there, it was fun. They didn't have to go anywhere. The whole group was here. But when her mother found out about hanging out with Leslie, she didn't approve. Where's Alexander? Selena came to see Leslie. I don't know. He hasn't come yet, she said. Selena was offended because he goes somewhere without her. She did not even suspect that the guy could be doing some other personal things of his own. And the one at this time with his friend dipped at the disco girls from the pedagogical school. Naturally, Selena couldn't know about it, and probably Hannah didn't even know about it. And when with Alexander they began to meet after a day after two, then the girl realized that he was still going somewhere. Even though Hannah supported her in everything, it still didn't help. Rightly said then Alexander that it was her maximalist love at 15. When winter was almost over, they sat at Leslie's as before. Alexander came in. Hello everyone. He walked into the room, saw Selena, smiled, immediately went to her, took her hands. Where have you been again? She asked him, although she realized that he had never offered anything, neither to meet nor to be friends, never confessed his feelings, but she still considered him hers. Where I was, there is no longer, he laughed, stood up, picked up the girl, began to kiss her. Alexander, you look kind of cheerful today, Selena said. Yes, he kissed her once more. Did something happen? She saw that this joy was all fake. Selena, I'm sorry, he kissed and kissed her. What for? Tell me already? She pushed him away from her. It was the first time she had ever done that. I'm getting married. I have a wedding in 2 weeks. He said those words and Selena felt like he slapped her. I don't get it. How are you getting married? She stood there in a complete stupor. That's when Hannah walked into the room. I did mishear, she asked. No, guys, I don't know how it happened, but Amy's pregnant. I can't leave her now. He didn't look Selena in the eye. Get off. She took his hands off her, then ran out of the apartment and went to her apartment. What's wrong with you? Saw her mother, how she felt when she came home. Don't talk to me, no one. Went into her room and closed Celine. The tears flowed by themselves. There was such pain in her soul. She didn't know what to do, what to say, how to act. How could he do this to her? Because she had given herself to him completely, dissolved into him, and he just did not understand. Selena didn't go out all week. She didn't even go down to Leslie's to avoid meeting anyone. After the weekend, the neighbor came to see her on her own. Come on, we need to talk. She called her over to her place. The girl left the apartment, quietly went down to Leslie's place. They were sitting in the kitchen. Will you go? Asked Hannah to her. Where to? The neighbor didn't even smile. To the wedding. Where else? Hannah knew it hurt Selena to hear that, but she could not ask because Alexander had asked her to. And what am I going to be there as, a bridesmaid? Selena grinned sadly. Well, enough already. He's an adult. You're still a schoolgirl. How many you will have like him all? Do not be sad. Let him go. Let him get married and everything will be fine with him. And you too, persuaded her friend. And you know, I'll go, said Selena, because she had nothing to lose. And she would see this bride, who he had traded her for. The girl was not stupid. She really realized that at that age, she could not offer Alexander anything, and he apparently could not wait. That day, when there was a wedding, she tried strong alcohol for the first time, and then she danced, and then with her sisters she went out for a walk somewhere. That day was like a blur. It was painful to watch a happy neighbor kissing some other girl. It was a year away from graduation. Alexander and Amy had gone somewhere. They just weren't in the apartment. At first, Selena felt bad. She was bored. She didn't go anywhere. She stopped talking to Leslie. Then Hannah and Tom moved out. The girl finished her studies, got her diploma, and went to another city to enroll. It had been a long time since Alexander had told her he had someone else. By the time she studied at the institute, the pain had somehow dulled. Everything was forgotten. Or maybe she had grown older and looked at many things differently. No one could explain that. Selena, are you always so sad? Asked her roommate in the dormitory. No, I'm normal, she answered. Yes, I see how normal you are. You spend all day in the room. It would be better to study, read something, notes rewrite, but that's just sitting there, doing nothing, said to her Betty. Why do nothing, I think, answered Selena. Ha ha, ha. That's an argument. That's the first time I've ever heard that. Her friend laughed at her. I don't see anything funny, turned away from her neighbor. Come on, stop being sad and thinking. Let's go for a walk, she called her. Oh, I'm so reluctant, Selena honestly admitted. Tell me, when was the last time you went out with guys, dated, went to a disco or something else? Sat down next to her Betty. When, never. At that moment, she remembered how with Alexander they went out, how he played guitar to her, sang songs. Well, Betty was waiting for her to act. And you know what? Okay, let's go, Selena agreed with her. That's another thing. Come on, get up. I'll show you that you can not only think, but also have a good time, immediately revived girlfriend. They went outside, went to the center of the city. It was very beautiful. There were benches. You could sit and meet with friends. Here they are. Now I'll introduce you, said Betty to Selene. A group of young people approached them, where there were both girls and guys. After introductions, they started talking to Selena as if they had known her forever. And among all of them, the girls singled one out. His name was Michael. He wasn't like the others. If everyone else wanted to drink, go for a walk, go to a disco or something else, this one was kind of pensive. He was always looking somewhere, not sitting with everyone else. But today Selena was too shy to approach him because she didn't know what to talk about and what to do. They returned home with the neighbor. She began to ask how and what, liked, did not like. Who is this Michael? Selena did not want to put this conversation in a long box. Wow, girlfriend, the first time she went out on the street, met the company, and immediately began to build bridges, Betty told her. Come on, I was just finding out. The girl was immediately embarrassed. Come on, say everything straight. I understand, smiled roommate. What can I say? I just liked the guy and wanted to know something about him, shrugged Selena. Well, I can't even tell you anything about him. He's always so quiet, though he gathers with us all the time, but he doesn't say much when he's talking. If everyone is dancing, he sits aside. They tell jokes, he laughs, but he never speaks. Began to remember Betty about Michael. I see. Selena stopped talking. Why don't you ask him yourself? Said her friend confidently. Maybe someday I'll get my act together and ask, felt the girl's cheeks flush. The next day, when they came in from their studies, they immediately started packing. Now it was only worth it to look at her roommate as she smiled and nodded at her, showing that she was ready to go again today. So are you going to talk to him today? Betty was curious. I don't know. I guess Selena wasn't a time in person, but after what happened to her in her relationship with Alexander, she had changed a bit. Today, all the guys were at the cafe when everyone was sitting around laughing about something. That's when Selena came up to Michael. Why aren't you laughing with everyone else? She asked. How about you? He turned to her. I don't know. She was confused by the question. She was expecting something else. Well, I'm kind of new in this company. I don't know much yet, she said. Well, I'm more of a listener than a talker. I'm interested in these guys, interested in watching what they do, how they do it, but I don't really want to take part in it, Michael told her and looked at her with his clear blue eyes. Selena could see that he was waiting for an answer or some other word from her, but she didn't know what to say, what to talk about. She couldn't think of anything to ask either. How about we get out of here? Michael suggested himself. Where should we go? The girl asked him. Yes, anywhere, he told her. Of course, I'm new to this city, but I know a place here. I discovered it recently. Come on, I'll show you, she smiled at him. Now Selena felt inside that something was changing in her. She really liked this guy. In all the time she had spent without Alexander, she had never looked at other young men. Let's go, he stood up. BT, we'll go for a walk with Michael. I hope no one will mind. She turned to her girlfriend, but looked at all the guys. Yeah, sure, come on. Her roommate winked at her and smiled. They left the cafe and headed in the direction where the private sector was. I even wonder where you're taking me, Michael said after a long silence. It is certainly not close, but believe me, it is very beautiful there. She said so because she could not explain where she was taking the young man. They had practically reached the exit from the city. There was a big bridge there. Selena asked him to help her, and she started to go down. Michael gave her a hand, helped her, and then went down himself. Now they were under the bridge. There was a ledge to sit on, and as they did so, Selena took the boy by the chin and turned his head to the side. Look, she said. There was a river with a swift current, with large rocks piled along the edges, and a young forest framing the river. Yes, you're right, it's really beautiful here, he told her. Brr, she shivered. Are you cold? He turned to her. Yes, I didn't think it would be chilly here, but apparently from the river, she wrapped her arms around herself. Come here, he moved closer. Celine didn't resist. The young man put his arms around her and pulled his jacket over her back. Thank you, she lifted her head and looked up at him. You smell so good, Michael suddenly told her. What? She laughed. It's true, he answered her. You're really different. No one has ever said such a compliment to me before, she giggled. From there they sat in silence, watching the water flow. When a few hours had passed, the girl stood up. Hello, he came up and said to her. Hello, everything inside her shook again. Her hands trembled, just like her voice. The girl could not pull herself together. How are you? Alexander asked her. You and I haven't seen each other for so many years, and besides the banal how are you, you didn't know what to ask me. She finally managed to answer. Selena, I'm sorry. He looked at her and she could see that his feeling hadn't gone anywhere either. No way. She stepped around him and wanted to walk away, but he wouldn't let her. Wait, let's go somewhere and talk, he suggested to her. Alexander, please don't start. She really didn't want this. No, she really wanted it, but that would mean betraying her, Michael. We'll go. Everything will be fine. I promise you. He pulled her with him. The girl closed her eyes. She knew she was doing the wrong thing, but she couldn't help it. They walked to a small cafe. Alexander was saying something. She was smiling. Selena just sat and looked at the man she cared so much about. Why aren't you saying anything? He asked her. I don't know what to say to you. I realize that you deceived me, betrayed me, but I can't help it. I just want to be near you. Now she wasn't as embarrassed as before. Okay, come here. He held out his hand to her. Selena stood up, walking over to him. He sat her on his lap and started kissing her neck, her hair. She closed her eyes and just gave in to those feelings. Why does it have to be like this every time? She spoke softly. Shall we go to my place? He whispered to her. Do you live there too? She asked him. Yep, he said back to her. What about your wife? This question was not just because she was worried that Amy might see them, but in general, whether she was there now or not. We divorced. He looked into the girl's eyes. Good, she didn't bother asking him why, about what, because she realized that if he wanted to, he would tell her. Now, when they came to the entrance where they both lived, Selena smiled. She took off her shoes, as in childhood, and quietly began to climb the stairs. Alexander carried her bag, followed, and smiled. They entered the apartment, whispered for a long time, then started kissing. When Selena woke up in his bed in the morning, she had no regrets. Are you going to stay? Alexander asked her. No, actually, I didn't want to tell you about it yesterday. I'm getting married. She said those words and smiled. I don't see anything funny, he told her. I just remembered how you once said those words to me just like that, she kissed him. And the fact that you are now cheating on your fiancé, is that normal? Alexander asked her. Yes, I realize that I am doing wrong, but I couldn't stop myself, she said, got up and started to dress. Will I see you again? He sat up in bed. I can't answer that question for you, she told him, took her bag and shoes in her hands, quietly left the apartment, went down to the floor. There she put on her heels and started to climb back up. Selena knocked on the door. Her mother opened it immediately. Hi, cheered both of them as Selena hugged the woman. The mother only hummed and looked at her. What? Her daughter asked her. Nothing, hands are warm. After that they talked a lot and for a long time, and closer to the weekend together went to where Michael and Selena lived. Everything went well. The girl did not even remember about her cheating. Yes, and it was hard to call it cheating. In fact, it was, but not to her liking. She loved this man and wanted to always be with him. And maybe now that her dream had come true, she would forget him forever. But that's just what she thought to herself. 3 years passed. Things were going very well in her and Michael's relationship. Her husband was already working. Now Selena was getting a job too. When she had worked almost a year, she was entitled to a vacation. Then Oma, I'm going. She looked at her husband. Yes, of course. Where do you want to go? He was interested. First of all, I'll visit my mom, and then we'll see. She almost never hid anything from him. Great. It was warm between them now, as it always was. And so Selena was walking up her entryway again. She glanced at Alexander's door, stepping through her own. Her parents were happy to see her arrive. And when the next day she wanted to meet her friends, she went out into the yard, and again she saw him. And again she couldn't pass by. She stopped. Today, no one asked how and who was doing. They just hugged and started kissing. So funny, said the girl, when they were already at Alexander's apartment. What's so funny? He didn't understand. I did not know. We meet once every 5 years, she exaggerated. My beautiful. He removed the bangs from her eyes. Alexander, don't please, she asked him, knowing that again she would do nothing to make them break up and never meet again. How are you here now? I came on vacation, decided first to see my mother, and then already rushed somewhere further. She was pleased to lie next to him. And let's go together, suggested to her Alexander. I don't mind. She turned to him and kissed him. Mom, as usual, didn't know anything. Selena told her she was going alone. She took her suitcase and went to the train station. Alexander was already waiting for her there. They spent the whole vacation together. They both came back, realizing that she was about to go home. Can't you stay? He asked her. No, she didn't lie to him because she didn't want to hurt Michael. On the last night, Alexander had kissed her so much that Selena was ready to change her mind, but she mustered up all her willpower and left. She arrived home and Michael greeted her with flowers. He always did that because he was a very attentive and caring husband. She was a little embarrassed in front of him, but she smiled. Life went on. Almost a year passed, and when Selena was once again going on vacation, she decided that if she met Alexander, she would definitely tell everything to Michael, and they would divorce. And so, when the bags were already packed and she was ready to go out, she suddenly felt sick. What's wrong? Michael came running up to her. I don't know, maybe my blood pressure dropped, and I was dizzy and nauseous. Don't you think? Michael stopped talking and smiled. You mean the pregnancy? Selena guessed. Yeah, he nodded affirmatively. But it was easy to check. They'd been waiting for this moment for a long time, and now, when she was about to leave, it had come. When it was confirmed, of course, she decided to stay with her husband, called her mom, told her the good news. After that, it was a hard time. All year long, she was nauseous, her blood pressure was high, her legs were swollen. Selena just couldn't wait until it was time to burst into tears. And then it happened. Their firstborn son was born and they named him Mark. Selena had always felt like a young girl who could do anything, but when the baby came into the world, the time somehow quickly ran away. Here she was sitting with him in the maternity leave, and now it's time for him to go to kindergarten. Now there were already other worries, some crafts, applications, everything else. Michael had been around all this time, but they were like neighbors. Michael, should we split up like you did? Selena asked him in the kitchen. I don't know. If you want to, let's get a divorce. He was apathetic as always. Why are you like this? She sat down on the chair next to him. Like what? He didn't look at her. Oh, okay, she got up, went to her room. So life went on, and when Mark was in 4th grade, Selena, after all, made up her mind and filed for divorce. The apartment was Michael's parents', so there was nothing to divide. She packed some things, and together with her son, they went to Selena's hometown. Do not regret that so many years have passed, her mother asked her. What's there to regret? I'm like in a cage. Here is a child with whom I need to constantly study, something to do, on the other hand. Pharmacy husband, who always does not care what I say. He will do. Selena was nervous. Don't be so hard on yourself, her mother told her. Say, Mom, are any of the girls left in town? She asked her. You know, I think Hannah's here. The woman remembered something. Do you think they still have a home phone or not anymore? Smiled Selena. You dial it? Check. She's been living with her grandmother lately. Maybe she still has one. Her mother shrugged. Selena dialed her school friend's home number, and after a couple of beeps she heard her. Hannah, hi, she said cheerfully. Selena, it can't be how many years it's been. Couldn't believe it. They arranged to meet, and that evening they spent a lot of fun. Almost all night Selena told Hannah what they had had over the years. They saw that they had changed a lot, They both had children, a divorce under their belt. Well, you go ahead, don't get lost, Hannah told her. Yeah, now, I guess I won't get lost, as long as I've come here to live here, Celine told her. The time was practically 5 in the morning when she went outside and walked home. And when she walked into the courtyard, she just laughed. There at the table sat none other than Alexander. This just can't be. She walked towards him. Selena, how are you here at this hour? He looked up at her. I left my husband, I came to my mother, and you? Now she was no longer shy, sat down next to him and took his hand. I'm sick of everything at home. I went out for some fresh air. He sighed and smiled, but it turned out to be sad. At 5 in the morning, she shook her head. Aha, you left for me? I had nothing left. Met with one, a little lived together, then decided to get married. And now I still regret that I went to this step, said calmly Alexander. I see, and I wanted to live with my mother. But now I realize that I'll probably rent an apartment, Selena said slowly. They exchanged phone numbers, hugged, entered the entrance together, went upstairs. Bye, he looked into her eyes. Bye, she walked into the house. Inside her, it was like butterflies were fluttering. What's the matter with you? Did you meet the neighbor again? Saw her mother, what a state she was in. That's it, Mom, enough, it's been so long, it's boring. She went into her room where her son was sleeping, lay down next to him. The next day, as she wanted, Selena really rented an apartment and in the evening called Alexandra. If you want to come, I'll give you the address now, she told him. I'm on my way, he answered and hung up. Selena told her mom that she wouldn't take the baby with her because she wanted to do some repairs. She herself just wanted to meet Alexander. He arrived. They briefly sat at the table, drank a little wine, and then they were together again in bed. He hugged her, kissed her, stroked her hair. She touched his stubble, remembering how good they had been together. Funny, she said. Funny to you again. What is it this time? Alexander asked her. How many years you and I have been together? A lot, but really not at all, she replied. No, it's only physically we are not together, but for real? He looked expectantly. Well, 15 years for sure, she counted in her head. Selena raised up on her elbow. Can you imagine? So many years we love each other, and there's no way we can be together. Alexander lay on his back and sighed. Maybe it's not fate. Selena kissed him. I don't know the answer to that question. He squeezed his eyes shut, sighed, hugged her, realizing that in the morning he would still have to go back to his wife. We can't be together now either, can we? She looked at him. You see, Selena, yes, my wife is giving me a hard time, but I can't hurt her, at least not yet. I need time, he told her. Okay, I don't demand anything from you, she smiled. Now that Mark was being sent to his grandmother's house for the weekend, Selena and Alexander were seeing each other again, and there were already conscious meetings between two adults. What have you been doing for a week? Alexander asked her. Nothing, back and forth. Getting a job, she said quickly. Did not meet anyone. Asked another question. Why are you talking like that? Selena didn't understand. You know how jealous I am of you. He kissed her without stopping. Himself, then with his wife, does not want to offend her, but I am jealous, and I do not am, and others will not give. Did not understand his girlfriend. All right, calm down, he pulled her to him. When Selena got a job, perhaps it was Alexander's fault, who was always talking about it, or maybe she wanted it herself. But that's where she met Paul. He worked as a security guard, and he was such a simple guy. You could talk to him about anything, and her mom liked him. Mark began to treat him normally. Alexander, I'm getting married, Selena told him once when we met. I don't get it. He looked at her, realizing that she had never once told him about any other men or meeting them. I'm sorry, but if you want, we can keep seeing each other, she said. Alexander quickly got up, got dressed and left without saying a word. Selena realized that she had hurt him, but it wasn't good to live alone either. After the wedding, Paul suggested that Selena go to the north to try to make some money there. She didn't mind because she needed the distraction. Her mom talked her into leaving Mark here, not picking him up from school. That was the deal. Leaving Mark here, not picking him up from school. That was the deal. Strange as it may seem, The young couple settled down quickly after arriving in the north. They found a job, got good money, and somehow Paul began to drift away from his wife. Here he drank once, here is the second, came home drunk, began to complain about how hard his life. When Selena said the same thing, he only nodded his head, not believing her. Family life lasted only 3 years. During that time, Selena only went home once on vacation to see her son. The rest of the time, they'd only talk on the phone. And now she was standing on the doorstep with a bag, looking at Paul, and could not believe that from a handsome, cheerful, cool guy he had turned into a sullen man who was always dissatisfied with something. When she came back to her hometown, she applied to the bank, took a mortgage. The money for the first installment was enough. Now she had her own apartment, where she and Mark moved. Everything was good. Selena began to make repairs. Her mother often came to visit them. Then they came to her, and the repairs were progressing. Now as Selena wanted to go on vacation, which happened twice in a year, she took her mother there, and strangely enough, they were very good together. "And why did your life turn out this way?" the woman asked her. "Mom, do not start. Did not want to talk about it, daughter. I'm not starting. Everything is still ahead of you. You're only..." She didn't have time to finish. Selena interrupted her. "Let's not talk about age right now," she asked her. "Okay," the woman agreed. Life went on as usual. And then the mother got a trip to a sanatorium for 2. She went to Selena. "Oh, no. I'm not going with you." She immediately waved her hands. "I see." The woman knew there would be nothing for her to do at the sanatorium. "Then I'll take Mark with me." "That's fine. Go, you rest there, and I'll rest from you," laughed Selena. Grandmother and grandson packed their bags. They left. Selena had only been home alone for 2 days. She just enjoyed this loneliness because there was someone in her life all the time. And so she decided to go to the store, where the very fateful meeting took place. When Alexander said hello to her, Selena went about her usual business. She went to work, met with friends. On her day off, she decided to go to her mother's apartment to help her with the kitchen renovations while she was away. Hi, she passed by her father's room and immediately began to prepare the room for wallpapering. "Are you going to be here alone?" The man didn't understand. "Why not?" she wondered. "Okay," the father waved his hand. He was not in the life of this family at all. When everything was finished, Selena went home. It was a day off, 7 o'clock in the evening. She thought it would be good to meet Hannah. The girl took her phone out of her pocket, went into the entryway, but she didn't have time to dial the number. Alexander was sitting on the windowsill in the entryway. "What are you doing here?" Selena was surprised. "I'm waiting for you." He was not embarrassed at all. "Ah." She stretched out, passed by, came up, opened the door, and waited for him to come in, so as not to find out all this on the stairwell. "Are you offended?" He crossed the threshold. "No," she replied wryly. "I see." Alexander realized that he was guilty before Selena. "Will you have tea?" The hostess realized that today she would not be able to go anywhere. "Yes." He sat down on a chair and looked at her. "Well, tell me, why did you come?" She turned her back to the stove, doing something there so as not to see Alexander. "I couldn't." He didn't explain anything. "I see. If now I cannot." She could not help but take offense at him. "Honey, I had so much work to do." He approached her, and now he had no doubt that she would not resist. "Alexander," she pressed her back to him. "I took a few days off." He spoke directly into her ear. "So." Selena turned to him. "Spend that time together." He turned off the stove and pulled her into the room. "Wait." She couldn't keep up with him. And again the gentle embrace, the hot kisses, everything the girl liked so much. She lay on his arm and thought of different things. "What do you think?" He was lying on his back. "Why do you think I'm thinking about something right now?" She smiled at such a tautology. "Silence means you're thinking. A man can't do otherwise." He turned a little towards her. "What can I think about? Only you." She smiled and kissed his shoulder. "And what is there in your thoughts?" Alexandra wondered. "Nothing. I think that I should have waited so many years to lie with you like this now." She turned on her stomach. "Selena, I love you so much." He stroked her. "I love you." She was having a ball. They lay there, cuddling. They didn't want to get up at all. They fell asleep. In the morning, the girl woke up first. She wanted to surprise her guests with something. She went to the kitchen, started the dough for pancakes, and began cooking. At the same time, she had a kettle boiling. Selena made fragrant coffee, rolled the pancakes beautifully, arranged everything on a plate. She took a small creamer, filled it with jam, which her mother brewed. "Wake up, darling," she brought everything to his bed. "Good morning." He opened his eyes. "Look what I made for you." She put a plate on the nightstand. "What a delicious smell," Alexander stretched. He started to eat his breakfast, at the same moment giving a bite to Selena as well. They were acting like teenagers, though it wasn't like that at all. "What are we going to do today?" she asked and smiled. Probably for the first time in her life, she was so happy around a man. "I don't know," suggested. He looked at her with loving eyes. "Let's go to the park where we used to walk," she suggested and asked at the same time. "I don't even know." He was somehow embarrassed. "Why?" She pouted her lips, pretending to be offended. "And let's order something and lie around all day." He said his version of leisure time. "I have great movies." She wanted to watch them for a long time, but somehow she didn't have time. "See, you wanted to go to the park." He hugged her again. They couldn't get enough of each other. They couldn't let each other out of their embrace. So they lay like Alexander suggested. They didn't even make the bed. "That's it, enough chilling," Selena said the next morning. She had to go to work. "Do you mind if I stay here?" he asked her. Of course not, she was going to. "I'll be there soon." She kissed her lover and left. Everyone who saw the girl now realized that she had something wrong, because she only did not glow with happiness. "Are you in love, friend?" A coworker came up to her. "You know, I don't want to tell anything yet, somehow later." So as not to jinx it, Selena was afraid that Alexander could leave again and never come back. "Okay, I see that you're doing well. I will not interfere," withdrew from her. Somehow the girl finished the day. Home did not go and flew. Now Selena did not care who would think about her, how she behaved. The girl went to the store, bought everything for dinner, went to the house, and another fabulous evening took place. "I feel so good with you." The man pressed her against him. Even though Selena realized that she had accepted him once again, and he might think it would always be like this. If he did something or made a mess of things, she would still forgive him and take him back. But she couldn't help it. So many years without a normal relationship had taken its toll. "Would you give birth to me?" suddenly asked Alexander. "Do not understand?" She stopped the course of her thoughts because they were interrupted by his strange question. "And what is not clear?" He turned to her. "What gave birth? I'm not at that age anymore," she giggled. "You see, after my daughter died, I want children so much, but I cannot get," Alexander admitted. Of course, I understand everything, but..." The girl stopped talking. On the one hand, she wanted to please her lover, and on the other hand, she did not know if she needed another child. "Okay, let's go." He leaned back on the pillow. "I need to think." Selena found something to say. "Okay." They turned on the next episode of the movie and began to watch, each thinking about his own. Alexander's weekend ended quickly, and he had to go to work again. And as Selena worked in an ordinary organization, went there in the morning and came in the evening, then Alexander worked for himself, and his working day was not rationed. "When should I expect you?" she asked. "I don't know. I hope to be back by evening," he told her, kissed her and left. "Okay, bye." She was afraid to let him go. But love did not deceive. Now every day, even if not at 5, but by evening still returned. "I've made dinner." A happy Selena greeted him. "Great. I'm hungry as a wolf," he said and went to wash his hands. During the time that Mom and Mark were in the sanatorium here, Selena has practically formed a family. "I've made up my mind," Selena told Alexander one evening. "To do what?" He turned to her. "To get pregnant." She looked at him and smiled again. "Thank you." He kissed her. "You what? It still needs to be done." She had so many unspent feelings that Selena was ready to do anything for this man. "Yes, I think there will be a problem with that. You'll have to go to the clinic," Alexander told her. "What? Why?" She didn't understand. "It so happens that I have problems, so it is necessary to do everything artificially." He looked her trustingly in the eyes. "It's very expensive." Selena knew how much IVF costs. "I have a classmate who works there. He will help me do everything," the man assured her. Okay, Selena snickered. She didn't think it would turn out like this. Now we have to go there, go through all the procedures, and then talk about the main thing. He kissed her. After that, Alexander wasn't home for a couple days. He called saying he had work, so he was delayed. Selena had nothing against it. She thought that since they were already talking about such serious topics, he would not deceive her. Hi, sorry it's been so long, he came to her. It's okay, she was thinking about the trip to the clinic. Will you be able to take a vacation at work? Alexander asked her. Yes, of course she doubted, but there was nothing to worry about yet. That's great. I'll then also tell the employees that I'll be gone for a while. He seemed happy. When everything was decided, they packed up and drove to the neighboring town where the clinic they needed was located. Isn't it dangerous? Selena asked Alexander. I do not know. The doctor will tell everything. He smiled. Let's agree on something with you. She didn't look at him. Okay, about what? Talk. He was ready for all conditions. If at the first time will not work, then we will not try again. She said all this somehow sad. Whatever you say, love. He kissed the top of her head. When they were at the hospital, Selena was taken somewhere, going through all the procedures she was told. Hi, Jacob. Alexander met his friend in the hallway. Hello. They went to his office. Is everything ready? The man looked at him. Yes, the man shook his head. Well, why are you reacting like that? Clapped his comrade on his shoulder. Do you realize what I'm doing? Raised the doctor's eyes at him. Come on, she's young. Everything will be fine, Alexander said cheerfully. That's it. We're waiting for your Selena, said the man, and started studying her papers. It was done. Alexander was staying with Jacob while Selena was at the clinic. She was perfectly healthy. They could proceed with the surgery. Together with Alexander, they signed all the paperwork. It seemed all they had to do now was wait. Alexander, are you sure? His friend asked him. Of course, there was not a single thought in his mind that he doubted anything. Just a few more days then, and everything will be ready, Jacob told him. That's fine. He went to the hospital to support Selena. When everything was done, they drove home together. The girl had gotten all the recommendations from the doctors, so now all they had to do was follow everything. Come on, let's not say anything to anyone yet, Alexander told her quietly and hugged her. Good. She was also afraid that something might not work out. I'll have to leave for work now. The man looked at his companion. Good, well, I'll go to my mom's. They've been here for a while, said resting. Selena didn't understand how she felt right now. That's fine. See you later. He kissed her, walked her to her mother's house, and then went about his business. Selena walked up the steps. There were so many thoughts in her head that she thought she would go crazy if she thought about it all. In the end, the girl decided not to tell her mom anything for now. How it was going to be would be the way it would be. Hi, she entered the apartment, first hugging her son and then already her mom. Where have you been so long? Looked at her woman. I became ill. I decided to take a long vacation and went to the clinic, a little to tidy up my health. And what are you in pain? The woman got worried. Nothing in particular, but it wouldn't hurt to get better. Selena lied flat out. Don't upset me like that. Her mother hugged her again. They sat and talked. Mark told how he and his grandmother had spent time in the sanatorium. And Selena had one thing on her mind, that now she was expecting a child from Alexander. Daughter, I can see that something is bothering you. When Mark went into the room, the mother decided to talk to the girl. Mom, I can't tell you anything yet because I don't know anything myself. Selena looked her in the eyes, so she believed her. And it wasn't untrue. The girl really wasn't sure about Alexander, about his attitude towards her, because he had betrayed her so many times. Okay, I won't pester you. When you think it's necessary, you'll tell me, kissed her daughter on the cheek. Thank you. Selena went home because she hoped that Alexander would come to her. And he came, which couldn't help but make her happy. What's with the mood? He asked from the threshold. I don't know, probably hormones. She came over and pressed herself against him. It's going to be okay, he hugged her. And now Selena felt as if he would never leave her side because of the pregnancy. I know, they stood like that in the hallway. The next day he went to work. Selena has to work too, but the condition was such that she just couldn't do anything. Hello, she called her boss. I'll stay home today. I feel really bad. She understood that she had just finished her vacation, but she couldn't do anything in that condition either. She stayed home. She stayed in bed practically the whole day. At some point, she had to call the doctor to ask why things were like this and what to do. "Selena, is everything all right?" Alexander called her back immediately. "Yes, how did you know?" She was surprised. "You forgot that Jacob is my friend. He was on his way to see her." "Right," she remembered. "I'll be there in a minute." He stopped talking to her. "Okay," the girl said simply already. Alexander arrived. He was so caring, doing everything for his girl. She immediately felt better as she snuggled up to him, fell asleep. From then on, Alexander was home or just around her as often and as long as possible. It was pleasing. One evening they were sitting at home. Selena was stirring sugar in a mug. "Alexander, are we going to live like this?" She asked him without raising her eyes. "Don't you get it?" He got nervous. "What is not clear here? I want to be your wife." She did not hide anything. "Let's wait until the baby is born, and then we will celebrate." He took her hand, pulled her, and pressed her to him. "Okay," she always agreed with him. When a few months passed, Mark noticed that his mother had gotten better. Now it was impossible to hide from anyone that she was expecting a child. "Honey, when did you want to tell me about this?" Her mom came to visit her. Selena became nervous that at any moment Alexander could come, and she did not want her and her mom to meet. "And let's go to your place, we'll talk, or just take a walk." The girl began to dress. Good was not against the mother. They went outside, walked, talked, but Selena never said anything to her mother. "Yes, I'm expecting a baby, but I haven't said anything to anyone yet," the daughter told cryptically. "Well, I don't recognize you lately." She wanted to hug Selena, but she pulled away a little. "What are you doing?" Her mom didn't understand. "I've been sick of the smell of perfume lately," she smiled. "Are you coming home or to our place?" Her mother asked because Mark was at her place. "I'm going home," turned around and walked Selena. "Okay, bye," the woman said in her back, realizing that not everything is easy in her daughter's life. Alexander could show up today and then be gone for 2 days. Some moments Selena just wondered why she had agreed to all of this. She would be alone now. How good it is when you don't think about anything, don't suffer about anyone. But no, she had to meet him again. Pregnancy had taken its toll. All Selena did now was cry and wait. "Where have you been?" She met Alexander once again with a red-eyed girl. "My darling," he began his song. "You know how I'm alone here. I can't tell my mom yet." She was crying again. "That's it. Calm down," he told her. They spent many days together, but except for compliments and hugs, Alexander gave nothing to the girl. Here, everything necessary, he brought her from the pharmacy medicines. "Thank you, but I need you." "Not all this," she showed her purchases. "Understand, I work. We need something to live on." He kissed and hugged her again. Toward nightfall, he left again. What the hell is this? Could not get out of her depression, girl. The next day, she called a friend with whom she worked together. "Hi, can you come over?" she asked her. "Yeah, what's wrong?" She got curious. "Come, I'll tell you everything," Selena finally decided. Her friend was at her place in the evening. They sat in the room. The girl was shocked to see Selena's belly. "So you'll be on maternity leave soon," she said. "Yeah, no one at work knows yet. I'm hiding it as best I can," she said. "Yes, friend, and I thought you were on a roll," smiled the colleague. I do not know why I went to all this," cried Selena, and then told her friend what and how she had happened. "What's wrong with you?" She couldn't believe her ears. "Here, imagine what women are stupid." Selena continued to cry. "And who is this Alexander of yours?" she asked. Here, the girl showed her a photo in her phone. "You what? I know him," made Big Eye's friend. "Well, a lot of people know him." Selena calmed down a bit. "And I know of his wife," the girl said. "I don't get it." "What wife? He's not married." It was Selena's turn to be surprised. "How come? She works in a kindergarten," said the colleague. "No way," cried the girl even more. At that moment, the doors opened. Alexander appeared in the apartment. "Hi, Alexander," stood up the guest to leave the apartment. By doing so, she let him know that she knew him. "Hello." He turned pale, walked into the room. "Stop crying. You could hurt the baby," he told Selena. "Why did you do all this?" She didn't understand. "I love you." He wanted to approach her. Until you get divorced, don't even think about it. She put her hands out in front of her. What are you listening to her? It's not enough what gossip is going around the city. Alexander tried to justify himself. What do you want to tell me that she just deceived me? Why should she? Cried, and could not understand how Alexander could do that to her. She thought that since they had been together since childhood, he loved her with a sincere love. How many times he had asked her to forgive him, and how could she believe it all? And why would she have a baby now if he wasn't around? How to tell her mother about all this? Many thoughts were in the girl's mind. Selena, he approached her. No, I told you. Until you go see your wife, you can't even come near my house, she told him. What am I supposed to tell her? Alexander started talking to her differently. How is that what? Tell her the whole truth, that you have a woman, that she is expecting a child from you, and most importantly, divorce. Through sobs she spoke. Selena. He looked at her and didn't say anything else. What? She wasn't ready to back down anywhere right now. Okay, come on by. I'll be right there. He walked out the apartment door. Selena stood in the hallway, only hearing the door of the entryway slam. She dialed her mom's number. Yes, daughter. Why are you so late? She was surprised. Mom? I need to talk to you. Finally got up the courage to tell her mother. Okay, come. She got excited because it was not often that her daughter shared with her. When Selena came and told all this to her mother, she found nothing better than to advise her to get acquainted with Alexander's wife herself. And what? How do you imagine it? I just come to her. So what? Selena was curious and incomprehensible. It had never happened in her life. Well, how is that what? First of all, your stomach goes to your forehead. And secondly, you have been in love and know each other for so long. The mother was in shock at what her daughter is doing. Although not a little girl, there is a head on her shoulders. Why, maybe listen to you and really go? At this point, Selena even smiled because she imagined the eyes of a woman who just like her trusted Alexander. Go and talk. And suddenly he really is nothing, this man, and you cry because of him. You'll have a baby. We'll raise it. We'll grow up. You're not as old as you say. Mom came over and hugged Selena. Thank you for your support, she told her. She hadn't slept half the night tonight because she was thinking about how and what she would say to the one her loved one was living with. At the same moment, she grinned. No matter how many wrongs he had brought her, she still thought about him, even in her head, that he was her favorite. But that wasn't important right now. It was important was different. The next day, from the very morning, Selena did not put off an alarm box, got dressed and went exactly to the kindergarten where Alice's wife Alexander worked. Naturally, neither to him nor to anyone else she said anything. Hello, Selena entered the kindergarten. When asked who she wanted, she said, but we can't call her now. The workday has already started. She's with the children. Some woman spoke to her. Okay, I'll go to the group then. Celine had nothing to lose. The one she was talking to now rushed after her. At the noise, other teachers ran out. Also the music teacher, the speech therapist came too. And when Selena entered the group where Alice works, there were already quite a few adults there. Hello, Alice, a pregnant girl said to her. She unbuttoned her coat on purpose so that her big belly could be seen better. Hello, Selena, she replied, and her colleagues tensed up. And what, you think he'll stay with you? We've been together for so long. I'm expecting a child from him. Soon it will be born. Selena began to tell her directly into her eyes. My dear, you are such a fool, grinned Alice. At this moment, all the colleagues were shocked that the wife did not react in any way to the fact that her husband had a mistress. Why did I become a fool? The girl did not understand anything. She looked at those present with confusion. Don't you know whose child it is? Alice asked a strange question. Of course I know mine, answered her interlocutor. Everyone else stood there silent and just shocked at what they were hearing here now. No, it's my child, mine and Alexandra's. We've been looking for a surrogate mother for a long time, but it's expensive, and no one agreed in our city. And then you came along. Alexander offered me a plan. I didn't refuse. The embryo was being prepared, so they planted it in you. Alice explained to her. What are you talking about? I signed all the documents for IVF. Selena shouted loudly. No, you signed the papers that you agreed to become a surrogate mother. Naturally, we'll pay you the money, but you have to give up the baby. Alice was as calm as a boa constrictor, which made everyone around her terrified. I won't give it to you. It's my baby. Selena screamed at her. They tried to calm her down, but she was already in such a state that she couldn't see anyone or anything. She ran down the stairs and out into the street. She needed to get home right away because anything could happen to her in this state. How could all this have happened? And in fact, if it was true, it could be called betrayal more than betrayal. How could you do this to me? She called Alexandra on the way. Selena, tell me exactly what happened. He heard that she is in a very bad condition. What's going on, and you're asking me that? She shouted all over the street. Naturally, in such a condition did not have to wait for anything good. Selena was put in the hospital. In the evening she became ill. An ambulance was called. She was taken away. Alexander came as soon as he heard. Come here. She looked at him like a wolf at his prey. Beloved, believe me, I do not love her. I have always loved you. Everything she told you is not true. We did honestly, Alexander said and begged her. Man, you're only making things worse. She can't worry, it will be bad, the nurse told him. I will come tomorrow, and before that I will write. He sent the girl an air kiss. She lay on the bed, looking at the ceiling, and did not understand who then in life can be trusted. After this moment, it was not clear what to do at all. Selena decided to tell everything to her mom. Even though she didn't want to at first, she dialed her number, and even though it was very late, the woman came. Wow, her mom listened to her. Can you imagine how this could have happened? Selena cried. And I told you years ago that he would ruin your life, cried the mother along with her daughter. Don't. Now Selena tried to calm her down. At that moment there was a prickling at the bottom of her stomach. Ouch. Grabbed the girl for him. What? Did not understand the woman. I do not know, raised her eyes full of horror at her mother. Then she got up and ran into the corridor, called the doctor. Everyone immediately fussed, ran. The woman was put out into the corridor. Call Alexander. She heard her daughter ask her to do so. Alexander, hello, this is Selena's mom. She dialed his number from her phone. Did something happen? I was at her place a few hours ago. He asked tiredly. Yes, she's in labor. Nothing, the woman softened or hid. On my way, he said and passed out. Things were not easy for Selena. She was screaming loudly. The mother was left in the corridor only to worry. Alexander promised but never arrived. It had been hours, but he still hadn't been there. The mother kept dialing his number again and again, but no one answered. Some more time passed. The girl came out of the room, looked at the woman. Are you the mother? She asked. Yes, she nodded and walked over. You have a girl, 3,952 centimeters. Congratulations, she said, smiling. The granddaughter's new grandmother sat down on the couch that stood there. Thank you, she cried. It's okay. You will soon be able to see mom and baby, the nurse reassured. For some reason, time dragged very slowly, but finally, they are all together in the ward. The baby is lying in a separate crib. How are you? Mom asked her daughter. Everything is fine, and why Alexander is not there? You did not call him. Selena asked first of all. Called, he said he was on his way, but he is still not, said all that was mother. Well, it's in his repertoire, smiled the corners of her lips girl. Why don't you call them yourself? Mom handed her the phone. Come on, she took the device, dialed the number. Hello, she heard a man's voice. Selena pressed hang up. She looked at her mom. What are you doing? She saw confusion or fear in her eyes. It's not Alexander, she said. Who is? No one answered me at all. The woman was surprised. At that moment, the phone rang again. On the screen was Alexander's number. I'm listening, Selena answered. You just called, she heard. Who is this man to you? A new question. He is the father of my child, Selena said calmly. She tried not to be nervous. Together with his wife, they were in an accident. They are being taken to the hospital now. She learned about what happened. What do I have to do? Selena got worried. I just informed you about it. You can take care of it yourself, she beeped. And what? Waited for her mother to know what Selena had learned, because her eyes were getting bigger and bigger during the conversation. And then she started to cry. Alexander is in the hospital, and together with his Alice, cried Selena even harder. At that moment, the baby cried. It needed to be fed. So the woman left the room again. She decided to go to where Alexander had been brought and talk to him. Since she decided, she started to do it. The woman called a cab, reached the hospital. What she learned there made her change her plans a bit. "Hello, a husband and wife who had been in an accident were recently admitted here." The visitor spoke quickly. "Yes, but I want to upset you. While the ambulance was on its way to the hospital, the woman passed away and the man is in a coma," the doctor told her. "I see, thank you." She went home, didn't know whether to tell her daughter or not. She decided that when she was discharged, she would tell her. Every day Grandma and Mark visited Selena. Everything was fine, so they were discharged within a week. Everyone was happy. "I'm wondering why Alexander isn't in touch. What's up with them? I need to call," Selena told her mother. "Selena, I have something to tell you," lowered her mother's eyes and spoke out what she had learned that day at the hospital. "Mammy, can you stay with Sophia? I need to go to him." She looked at him with a pleading look. "But let's hurry up. The child will soon be hungry." She realized that it was useless to do anything. "Thank you, my dear," kissed her daughter and ran. She entered his room. He was lying with a broken leg, and something was with his hands. "Hello," she said quietly at him and smiled. "Hello." He looked only with his eyes. He couldn't even turn his head. "You've had a daughter? Congratulations." She leaned over and kissed him. "What did you name her?" Alexander had already been told what had happened to Alice, and he realized that this was really their child now. "Sophia," Celine said proudly. "Beautiful." He grinned as best he could. After that, the girl sat down on the edge of the bed next to him. "Will you be able to forgive me?" he asked for the 100th time in her life. "I think so, because you made me happy, and now you gave me a daughter," Selena cried. "I'm sorry." A tear rolled down her cheek. He looked at her. "I have to go now, but I'll come back tomorrow," she said and kissed him. She didn't know where she got so much love and kindness for this man. At home, she studied with the baby. Mark was also interested. He helped his mother to fill the bathtub with water to bathe Sophia. Afterwards, he rocked his little sister in his arms. "Mark, do you remember Alexander?" she asked him. "Of course, he came to visit you many times," nodded the boy. "Would you mind if he came to live with us?" Selena wasn't sure about that yet, but for some reason she thought that Alexander would do exactly that. "Of course not. If you will be happy with this man, then I'm all for it, especially since he is Sophia's father," hugged the boy to his mother. "You are the best son," she kissed him. Now they all went to bed, and in the morning the whole family went to the hospital. Alexander could already get up. On crutches, he waddled down the steps of the hospital. "Hello, Selena." Mark and Sophia were waiting for him in the street. "Hello." He shook Mark's hand and kissed his girls. After that, they sat on the bench for a while, talking, and then escorted the man back. "Now that time has passed, will you agree to be my wife?" Alexander asked. "Tell me, is it really true that everything was real with me?" she asked him. Of course, Alice's eggs somehow didn't fit, but you have to ask the doctor, he answered her, and lowered his head, because he was ashamed. "You know, even if it was not so, I still would not give this child to anyone." She hugged Alexander, and the goosebumps ran down her body, so she loved him. "I know, my love." He pressed himself against her and realized that this was the only one who would never deceive and betray.
Too much. Andrew was in a lot of pain. Emily's pain faded into the background. She was scared out of her mind. 3 weeks passed, but Andrew still couldn't recover. He couldn't eat. He felt like he was the reason William had left the family. "Andrew, it's not your fault," his mother tried to convince him. "It's just that your father betrayed you and me." "Then I didn't listen to him. I went to play with those boys," the son cried. "They were smoking. Dad found out and thought I smoked with them. He didn't forgive me. He didn't love me after that." Emily clutched her head. Andrew felt so much guilt that there seemed to be no way out of it. A month passed and Emily decided to file for divorce after all. She had gained some moral strength. William knew about it right away. He got in his car, headed for his mother-in-law and father-in-law's house. He didn't know what to do next. On the one hand, he loved Emily and his son. The latter was very dear to him, but everything in their lives had become monotonous. He wanted new impressions. He began to feel that he was getting old. Perhaps that's what drove him to adventure. Irene Alexis, Gregory Myron, his son-in-law, lowered his head. "I ask you to speak to me." The father-in-law looked at him angrily. He would have loved to punch him in the face. But Irene Alexis was a mother herself. She was worried about both Emily and Andrew. "Billy," she sighed. "Do you realize the pain you've caused them? But what were you missing?" "I don't know," he shrugged. "I want to apologize to Emily. I love her. I want to go back to them." "I seriously doubt she'll take you back," my mother-in-law said with annoyance in her voice. "But what were you thinking? You've got a mistress under your nose. But you will come back. And how will you live? Emily will see the tank all the time. We'll leave here," suddenly declared son-in-law. "There won't be any tank there." "Where to?" My father-in-law entered the conversation. "Do you think the rumor about you will not reach there?" he scolded. Anyway, Emily's parents promised to talk to her. Naturally, she didn't want to hear about her husband's return. "Mom, don't tell me anything about him," she said angrily. "I hate him. I'll divorce him." "Emily, listen to me." Irene Alexis tried to look at the problem from every angle. "I don't care what you decide. But I'm asking you to think about Andrew. The child is suffering." And it was true. Emily burst into tears. Her heart couldn't bear the sadness of her son. He thought of his father all the time, and the fact that William hadn't shown up all this time made it worse. And then the day came when Andrew didn't come home from school. When Emily was on duty, his grandfather would pick him up. But the woman's father reported that Andrew didn't show up today. Emily called in a substitute to cover her shift. Of course, there was nothing the police could do. So they searched for Andrew on their own. "Billy," Irene said excitedly to Alexis. "Andrew's missing. Has he come to see you?" "No," he said worriedly. "I'll be right over," he promised and got into the car. As much as Emily felt bad, she didn't say anything. Everyone started looking for Andrew. They found him at one of the playgrounds. "Oh, my son." His mother rushed over to him. "Demochka." She started kissing the child. "Daddy." When he saw William, he rushed to him. "Daddy," cried the boy. You could say that that incident had determined everything. As much as Emily didn't want to, she made the choice to reconcile with William because of her son. Everyone sat at Emily's parents' house and had a serious conversation. "We're going to move to another town," the son-in-law said at once. Andrew didn't take a step away from him. Emily agreed. She realized that no matter how womanizer was her husband, he sincerely loved his son. Perhaps that was why William had just taken a mistress. Emily had no intention of leaving her family. But that didn't make her feel any better. Cheating was still cheating, no matter how you looked at it. 2 months later, they sold the house, and Emily and her family moved to a neighboring town, which was 70 kilometers away. They bought a small house, as it was a more promising place, and accordingly, life was more expensive. Emily got a job as a post nurse in one of the hospitals. William found a crew and started doing repairs with them. Such services were in great demand. Andrew recovered quickly, enjoyed going to his new school, and made friends very quickly. Emily's life, despite the fact that she was doing the same things as before, seemed to take a new direction. "Why don't we have a baby?" her husband once said to her. "A child would bring us joy." "I'm not ready yet," she sighed. "I've been traveling a lot in the last year, but you're already 38. Where else can I put it off?" He objected. "And I'm not getting any younger either. I'm already 42. You can't say Emily got married late. She was 25. It's just that her job was stressful, so you can't get pregnant right away. "Let's revisit this conversation in 6 months," the wife asked. Still, Emily had her doubts. She kept thinking that the day would come when William would cheat on her again. "There won't be any more cheating," she assured herself. "We're fine. Why should our past determine our future?" But no matter how much she set herself up for the best, her intuition told her that something was bound to happen in her life. Maybe that was the real reason Emily didn't want a second child. It was May. Emily and her family had already been living in the new place for 8 months. Everyone had gotten used to it and had no idea how they had lived in their hometown a year ago. Andrew had grown up. He had already turned 11. The boys in the new school were more advanced. The boy had somehow grown up quickly. He was very seriously interested in modeling. He and 2 of his friends went to a children's club where they built various ships in scale. Very beautiful, praised Andrew's mother. "Son, how do you have the patience?" She laughed. "I would not be able to sit for hours and collect it all by crumbs." "You know, how interesting," Andrew said proudly. "We're going to exhibit in a competition." It wasn't that Andrew had grown cold to his father, but it was noticeable that he was now more interested in his friends than in his father. They still talked occasionally, especially when it came to their son's hobbies. But Emily could see that they had not become friends, and William was very tired. Sometimes there were urgent works, so that he could not even spend the night at home. And so Emily's life flowed in a new direction, and a few words about her work. In principle, the team was nothing. Emily immediately made a friend from the children's ward. The only one. The head therapist was a cold man. He even seemed stiff from the outside. And since Emily worked in his department, she still didn't understand how to communicate with him. Gregory Myron didn't seem to notice anyone. He was strict, but acted so professionally that without any doubt he could be called not only the best doctor of the hospital, but also of the whole region. Many, very many people bowed down to his talent, not that he admitted it. He paid no attention at all to rumors or anyone in his direction. He was constantly focused on his work. From the outside, it seemed that he could solve any task. There were enough instances where he alone was able to determine the true cause of an illness, and a man who was almost dying was discharged a month later. Gregory Myron didn't look like his usual self either. His hair was almost gray, but his face looked quite young. About 6 months later, Emily learned that he was only 47. It was Emily's shift when the doctor approached her. He looked concerned. "Emily," he said, "I need to pick you up for about an hour. I'll get Annie to keep an eye on the post. We're going to see a patient in 20 minutes. Be ready." Emily nodded. She rushed to Annie's procedure nurse. She informed her that the doctor had already spoken to her. "Annie, do you know what happened in there?" Emily asked. "He said it was a bad case," Annie replied. "There's an old woman. She's been in and out of the hospital a few times. Apparently she's gotten worse again. She has a son who keeps asking to be treated at home. And there's no room right now. I think that's why he's coming himself." Exactly 20 minutes later, the doctor came to pick Emily up and they headed to the address. Isaac Alexander was focused and silent. Emily was sometimes even afraid of his presence. He seemed sensual. So they reached the patient without a word. The doctor got out and headed for the entrance. The nurse hurried after him. The woman moaned. Emily's heart clenched. Isaac Alexander examined her and hesitated for a few moments. "Emily, take blood, urine," he said coldly. "I'll take a sample of the vomit myself." Isaac Alexander told the woman's son that he would call him in 2 days, and they would decide what to do. The doctor and the nurse went downstairs and got into his car. Isaac Alexander often drove his vehicle out on work-related errands, and Emily had never heard him ask his superiors for compensation. "I think it's something autoimmune," the doctor whispered. Emily flinched in surprise. "I think it's something masquerading as another disease," he continued. "How is that possible? Don't the tests tell us what the real cause is?" "You can do all the possible tests, ultrasounds and CT scans, and still not see the real cause," Isaac Alexander replied. "You see, we still don't know how the immune system works. We have only a superficial idea, like a small iceberg on the surface of the ocean, and a huge block hidden underwater. Too many factors affect this process. She has no serious diseases, no cancer. But she's falling apart before our eyes. What's happening to her? There's no answer. It's like something triggers and everything goes to hell. Then she goes into remission and everything's more or less fine." "What are you going to do with her?" Emily asked with interest. "Are you going to put her in the hospital?" "First we'll look at the tests," said Isaac Alexander. He stopped talking. They drove the rest of the way in silence, and Emily didn't ask any more questions. The workday continued, and she forgot about her morning commute. The night passed quietly, the May air putting her in a good mood. Emily lay on the couch and thought about her family. Maybe he's right, a thought popped into her head. Having a girl will strengthen our family. Yeah, I'm getting sick of medicine. Emily felt herself tanning. For years she had been responsible in her work, but the fatigue was building up. She and William didn't have the opportunity to go anywhere on vacation. They were making a little more money, but living in the city meant more expenses. Andrew went to sports and a modeling class, which also required money. Will we be able to afford all this if we have a daughter, she wondered. Morning came. Emily cheered up. A couple more hours and she would be going home. She got up and went about her duties. The ward was quiet and she began filling out the many logs. It was almost 8 o'clock when Emily got ready to go home. Another nurse had come to take over her shift, and Emily told her what had happened in the meantime. There were 3 post-nurses on the ward who were constantly changing. One of them was a very quiet woman. Lila was in her 50s and she usually didn't get involved in anything. But Amber, who came in now, was noted for her talkativeness and tendency to gossip. Closely, Amber jumped up to her. I have an anniversary in 3 days. You are required to attend. Do you understand me? She burned a glare at her coworker. Yeah, I'll be working anyway, Emily smiled. What's your anniversary? She was confused. Well, of course it is. 40 years, Amber announced proudly. There's even going to be a robot. That's what coworkers called Isaac Alexander among themselves. Can you imagine? When I told him that, say, let's eat cake, drink juice, he nodded to me in agreement. I doubt he'll even eat the cake, Emily laughed. I've never seen him at a meal. Here's coffee. Yeah, he's weird in general, Amber whispered in her ear. I heard he couldn't save his wife, so he takes his anger out on everyone. What happened to her? Curiosity piqued Emily. Didn't know he was married? Yeah, she had something serious going on there. He fought for her life. Took her to New York for a couple years. But nothing helped, Amber quickly echoed. Although I can't imagine who would marry him at all. Do you think he used to be this unsociable? Isaac Alexander is a good doctor, Emily sighed. He's just unlucky. Well, as they say, keep it simple and people will reach out to you. The woman laughed. Okay, until the anniversary. Emily didn't much like her coworker's attitude toward the doctor. He was a genius. They didn't realize that. He may not have been able to save his wife, but he had helped hundreds, or even thousands of people, after all. The woman also thought about the fact that she didn't want to be present at all these meetings at work. It was enough that she had a friend in the children's ward. The rest of the staff didn't really get her attention. Emily walked into the house. Andrew was already at school and her husband William was at work. Despite the sleepless night, she didn't feel like sleeping. She sipped some hot tea and her body relaxed. Emily lay down on the bed and fell asleep. Thus began a new day for her. After lunch, Emily was already doing chores around the house. Dinner was on the stove, she was cutting a salad, went out to get some greens in the vegetable garden, and stopped. The smells of May wafted through the air. Emily had always dreamed of spending a few days watching spring come. But it had never worked out. There were always things to do at home, so she couldn't afford to just sit idle. Emily closed her eyes. It made the smells even more vivid. A bird sang to her left. It felt good. I want a daughter, she said out loud and laughed at her own thoughts. Her soul sang. In the evening, her husband William returned from work. Andrew had returned from modeling. His eyes were burning. He spent almost half an hour telling his mother about his new job. Emily looked at him and realized that her boy had grown up a lot. A couple more years and he would turn into a guy. Mom, we're going to a competition at the sports school. Can you give me some money? He remembered soccer. Sure, she patted him on the head. Son, how much do you need? I'll call your coach. Emily realized that her secret dream of quitting her job was simply unrealistic. She had always wanted her children to have a better life than she or her parents had. Her father and mother had done everything they could for her. But if they'd had the money, Emily would have chosen a different profession. Not to say she liked medicine. She had dreamed of becoming an architect or a designer as a child, but as they say, it didn't work out. Late in the afternoon, William returned. He ate quickly and went straight to bed. Emily marveled again at how their relationship with her son had changed in just over a year. Andrew was no longer as attached to William, perhaps still to his mother. But Emily could see that just a little more and Andrew would begin to live a life of his own already. How strange does it feel, she thought as she went to bed. Somehow I was sure that my son would always be a little boy who would depend on us. How quickly had things changed. The rest of the days flew by quickly. It was getting close to the weekend, which meant Emily had to go to work again. God, she'd completely forgotten about Amber. Emily remembered tonight. She needed to buy a gift. Nothing came to mind, and it was too late. Emily decided to give her coworker the money to buy what she wanted herself. As the morning began, the hustle and bustle began. Amber arrived at 9 with 2 large bags. She started setting the table. Emily was minding her own business. She took the history of the patient they had traveled to with the doctor at the time. The woman quickly ran her eyes over the test results. Yeah, nothing much, she sighed. There was a slight elevation in the proteins in the general analysis, but it wasn't critical, just a fraction of a percent. Isaac Alexander is probably right. What if it all works on the principle of a wave and there was a failure? Then the indicators normalized. But it's already having repercussions. That's several cycles in a row. Emily wasn't a doctor, so she didn't really look into the problem. She didn't have the knowledge or experience. Amber came in. Everyone is already in the nurse's room, she reported. Isaac Alexander looked tired. Everyone congratulated Amber. Emily slipped money into her pocket. The birthday girl glowed. Most importantly, we wish you a speedy marriage. Annie raised her juice glass. We're tired of waiting for you to find one. Did you find him? Amber said cryptically. You won't believe it, just like I wanted. Tall, dark hair, green eyes, dimpled chin, about my age. Wow, murmured the female half. Isaac Alexander was silent, but he looked pleased. He came up to me on the street, Amber cheered. He even wears a watch like I like, with a big face. Emily swallowed. Something niggled in her chest. She chased away the bad feeling. And my favorite name is William, Amber declared. Soon we'll be together, and I'll finally wear my wedding ring. The co-workers sat for half an hour, needing to return to their posts. Emily was pale. She didn't fully realize why she felt so heavy. The nurse walked over to her colleague, pretending to help her clear her desk. Amber, I'm so happy for you, Emily said. I hope your prince isn't married. He's in the process of getting a divorce, she said happily. Billy was unlucky with his wife, so it's her own fault she left him. Does he have children? Emily held her breath. Amber looked at her questioningly. I'm worried about you. I don't know what's going on. Well, yes, daughter, calmed the birthday girl. Why are you being such a baby? I'm not completely stupid. I know what I'm doing. Yes, Emily smiled wryly. Once again, I wish you well. Emily returned home the next day, but she still had her doubts. She could hardly wait until evening. It was about 11 p.m. when her husband returned. Hi, she went up to him. William, we hardly see each other. She lowered her eyes. Emily, what do you want? It's a big city. You can't just live here. You've got to make it work, he smiled. You know, I've been thinking about it, and I think you're right. I want to have a daughter, his wife said suddenly. William was taken aback at first, then put his arms around Emily and kissed her. I'm glad you said yes, he said in a pleased tone. It will be good for both of us. Emily calmed down that evening, falling asleep in her husband's loving arms. She didn't want to think about Amber or her fiancé anymore. Nearly 2 more weeks passed. Emily had already forgotten what had happened at her coworker's anniversary party. Emily arrived early that day. Amber was dealing with a difficult patient. She had her cell phone on her desk. Suddenly it rang. Emily glanced at the screen. It said, "Beloved," something hot pulsed through her entire body. There was no response, and the phone went silent. Amber walked over. Emily informed her that someone had called her. The woman immediately grabbed the phone, pressing all the same name. Emily somehow miraculously looked at almost every digit of the number, except the last two. The magazine fell out of her hands, and she hesitated, but Amber had already gone to the window. In a soft voice, she was telling her lover something. Emily sat down at the table. Everything in her head was upside down. For her, it was a matter of life and death and two numbers. God, was that really pounding in her temples? Emily quickly grabbed her phone, called her husband. The phone was busy. Her heart nearly jumped out. She kept pressing and pressing William's number. Tears streamed from her eyes. Finally, the dial tone went off. Amber came to the table. "Emily, what's wrong?" "I'm at the facility," Billy's husband spoke quickly. "The landlord arrived, giving us a scandal. I called the supervisor." Emily didn't know what to say. "I was just worried," she barely said. "And for good reason." He sighed. "The boss won't pay us, and I'm so sick of it. You work, and then bang. For some reason we did nothing, and the house is shiny and the roof is intact, but somehow the owner doesn't see anything." Emily could barely contain herself, wiped away her tears, and went to the nurse's room. She was in a complicated emotional state. On the one hand, she felt like she was being cheated, and that made her seized with pain. On the other hand, she felt like it was all a coincidence, and she was just screwing with herself. "Emily, come here." The door opened suddenly, and in walked Dr. Isaac Alexander. It was still 30 minutes before the start of her shift. Isaac Alexander's request seemed odd. Emily cleaned herself up so as not to give away her tears and made her way to the doctor. He asked her to sit down. "I'm going on a business trip," he said seriously, "and I need an assistant. I've already made arrangements with the head doctor. Tell me, what about your family? Will it be possible for you to be away for a few days? I know you have a son." "Yes, Andrew is 11 now," the nurse replied, stammering. "He's independent. He mostly gets himself home from his training and club." In all her years at the hospital, this was the first time she'd ever been sent on a business trip. "All right then, Lily will be out tomorrow," Isaac informed Alexander. "And I'll pick you up at 8. Be ready." Emily sat back in her chair, but the doctor was already immersed in his work. The nurse had left. "Why me?" she whispered. "Wouldn't Amber be more suitable? She didn't have a family." It wasn't that Emily didn't want to go, but the whole thing seemed odd. Isaac Alexander never complimented her, and he never spoke to her except on business. Lily arrived in the evening, replacing Emily at the doctor's request. Now the nurses had to work together for a few days in 3 houses. Emily's husband couldn't believe his eyes. "What happened?" he asked. "I'm going on a business trip tomorrow," she said. "For 3 days. Billy, please take Andrew. He gets off much earlier than I do. It gets dark outside at 8 and he's home by half." "Mom, don't worry about me." Her son came up to her. "I'm not a little kid anymore." Yeah, she patted him on the head. "Andrew, you can already say that you are a man." "Have you sorted things out at work?" Billy asked. "Did you get paid?" "Yeah, our foreman came by with some guys. Anyway, they worked it out," he said. "Do you know what a drag this is? Last month we didn't get paid for the repairs, which is almost $25,000 each." Emily hadn't thought much about it, but now she saw that almost every month someone would underpay or deliberately lower the price. All in all, William's job was precarious. Emily sighed. In the morning, a car pulled up at 8 sharp. She grabbed her bag, headed to the doctor's office. He greeted her coldly. "Where are we going?" She couldn't help herself. "It's the first time I'm going on a business trip to a village," he replied calmly. "We will spend the night at my relative's house. The residents have recently had serious kidney problems, and the region has asked me to take a look. Will you help me take tests, give injections?" What could it be, Emily wondered. Some kind of waste being dumped. "That's the thing. There aren't any businesses there," Isaac Alexander replied. "They sent me an ultrasound. His kidneys are in a deplorable state, even to the point of kidney failure. The hospital in the municipal center is already overcrowded. I'm looking at those who are at home now. The local paramedic can't cope. We'll take the blood and urine to the lab this afternoon. Emily realized they had a tough job ahead of them. It was about the critically ill. At almost 11 o'clock, they pulled into the village. It was like a ghost. The streets were empty. Isaac Alexander stopped near one house and entered himself. After a while, he called out to Emily as well. "The master is in the hospital now," he said. "He knows I'll be with you for a few days at his place. Don't be afraid." The medical staff quickly dropped their belongings and began to go door to door. The pain and suffering made Emily's blood boil in her veins. Many lay half asleep. The paramedic was giving them painkillers, as there was nothing else he could do. Emily saw Isaac Alexander coldly examining one patient after another. She took blood and urine for analysis and placed them in special containers. "Now into town," the doctor commanded. "We were promised emergency tests. We don't have much time." "What do you think? Did you find something?" Emily looked at him with interest. "Isaac Alexander, is this some kind of epidemic?" "No, I think it's something in the water," he replied. "I've already collected 5 samples from the wells. We'll stop at the river and the lake on the way now. We'll have to take a look." They quickly took all the necessary things and drove into town. The doctor was silent. He was thinking hard about something. "It looks like oil," the doctor's voice finally broke the silence. "The toxic effect of heavy metals." "If there aren't any factories around here, then what is it?" Emily hesitated. "You know, the best way is to walk around the village with a metal detector. And everything will fall into place at once," the doctor sighed. "Some idiot buried some heavy metal residue somewhere. God knows what he did with them. But if we're talking about some kind of manufacturing, it's very possible." "But how? I mean, they check cars at checkpoints. How could they smuggle this stuff in?" "Well, lead, cadmium, arsenic, for example. I'm not sure about mercury. Aluminum doesn't have such an effect on humans. They're more afraid of it. But the others, it's enough to lose 5 or 10 pounds somewhere near the source. And they didn't do it now. Maybe 6 months ago. It's just that now it's all gone into the groundwater and it's coming out of the wells." The car stopped outside the local hospital. Emily realized they'd come to the next town over. This whole situation was freaking her out. Isaac Alexander took all the biological material to the laboratory and started talking to the head doctor. And Emily stood aside and thought about her own. Until almost 3 o'clock, the doctor was busy examining the injured patients. Unfortunately, 3 had already died. The kidneys were too seriously damaged. In addition, the small town hospital did not have expensive medicines. It was almost 8 when Isaac Alexander approached Emily again. She, too, helped him from time to time. "We're going home," he said. "We'll stop at some store on the way. Get something for dinner," the doctor offered tiredly. "Unfortunately, my relative hasn't gotten any better. All we can do is wait." "Emily, did you have to travel so much during the day that you couldn't even talk?" Isaac Alexander himself went to the store, bought food and water. Back in his college days, he made scrambled eggs in the kitchen. "Although you could say, nothing has changed in my life since those times. I'm not a foodie at all. I don't have enough time for that." "I'm not much of a cook either," Emily smiled, "although my family status obliges me to. But family is always a support," replied Isaac Alexander. "I can't say that I don't like loneliness," but sometimes he fell silent. "I heard that your wife died," Emily ventured. "I'm sorry." "Well, that was a long time ago," he sighed. "Besides, I'm so caught up in my work that I try not to think about it. Well, let's drink tea and go to bed. Tomorrow is not going to be an easy day. Perhaps we'll be able to get some results." Emily cleared the table. Isaac Alexander showed her the room to make her own bed in the next room. The woman had already called her husband. He was home. Andrew was already asleep. The busy day kept Emily from returning to her thoughts. She closed her eyes. A green meadow appeared in front of her, and Emily heard some voices. The vision turned into a dream, and the woman fell deeply into it. She awoke abruptly. Though still light at heart, the dream did not bode well for her. She was marrying William, saw her beautiful dress, her veil. Something will happen, she muttered, and she heard the door creak open. But something was catching. The doctor was already up, putting the kettle on in the kitchen. Emily came to her senses, and having changed her clothes, left the room. "Good morning," he said as dryly as before. "Let's have breakfast. We need to see the patients, and then we'll go back to the city." Both were silent, drinking coffee. Emily even liked Isaac Alexander's company. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. Toward the end, she couldn't take it anymore. "Why did you take me? After all, I have not worked with you for so long," she asked. "That's exactly the reason. I know the others very well," he said seriously. Emily was silent. She didn't quite understand what the doctor meant, but she didn't ask. 2 of the patients got worse. They had to be sent to the hospital. Isaac Alexander didn't seem nervous, but Emily could tell by the way his cheekbones moved. The city had gotten the first results. The prognosis was unfavorable, but just as I thought, lead and arsenic, he sighed. They dumped something right where the artesian pools were, brought the waste in and just poured it out of the barrels. Emily was shocked, but from the results, the water was the problem. The heavy metal levels were more than 20 times higher. The administration had already banned the use of the spring water for any purpose. Since few people kept livestock in the village, the deaths were not so widespread. The goats suffered the most. Isaac Alexander called the region time and time again, beating out the necessary drugs. The case reached New York. It was impossible to delay it, threatened the death of people. More doctors came to the village from other districts. The seriously ill began to be sent to places where there were opportunities for treatment and could be connected to the machines. The 3rd day was over. Emily and the doctor were going home. The relative they were staying with was feeling better, so there was hope for Isaac Alexander. "Is that your brother?" Emily asked him on the way home. "I'm very happy for him and for you." "No, he is my wife's brother," Isaac Alexander answered. "After her death, we sometimes communicate." Emily sank back into herself, remembering last night's dream. Her whole body was covered with goosebumps. Actually, they were supposed to arrive tomorrow morning, but Isaac Alexander decided to return at night. Emily didn't bother calling the household, carefully opened the wicket gate, then inserted the key as well, and the front door opened. The house was dark. Emily went in to see her son. He was asleep. She headed to her room and William was gone. Her wife walked to the hall, but he was absent there as well. She walked toward the garage. William always drove the car in for the night, and to her amazement, the car wasn't there either. Emily felt dizzy and dialed William. He didn't answer. It was 2 on the clock. "God, where is he?" she sobbed. Her nerves had frayed over the last few days, and Emily couldn't keep her cool. She could barely sleep. She had to stay home tomorrow, and her shift started the day after. "Mom, hi." Andrew was surprised to see her early in the morning. "I thought I would see you only in the evening." "Son, where is father?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Did you see him last night?" "Yes. When I went to bed, he was at home," Andrew answered at once. "Yeah, he'd already left for work. Look at the time. Dad's got a big order now, so he's leaving early these days." "So you haven't seen him in the mornings?" Emily asked. "Andrew, answer me." "No," shrugged his son. "Mom, what's going on? We weren't even expecting you until tonight. Dad said you'd go straight to work from your business trip." That was right. That was Emily's plan at first, but the other post nurse gave her until tomorrow morning to rest. Emily had forgotten to warn William about that. Something's not right here, she thought. When Andrew left for school, she wondered, where has he been sleeping all this time? It's no use asking him. I must find out for myself. William opened his eyes and stretched sweetly. Amber lay next to him. She was still asleep. The man got up and began to dress. "This has to end," he muttered to himself. Our affair had gone on too long. Still, William couldn't help himself. He didn't know what he wanted. He didn't want to lose Emily, because she was a reliable person. With her, he could spend a peaceful old age. And if anything, she would look after him. On the other hand, he was bored. He stood and looked at himself in the mirror and saw great potential. Except with Emily, it wasn't being realized. He wanted passion, crazy emotions, in general, everything that usually happens with mistresses. William forgot about Tammy all too quickly. He no longer felt bad about it, and Emily wouldn't know about it. Well, he'd go out for a couple months. It's nothing. He'd still be with his wife, he thought. The most interesting thing was that only in the middle of the novel William learned that Amber works in the same hospital where his wife works. Moreover, they were, you could say, co-workers. This confused William at first. He immediately wanted to break up with Amber, but she was so into him that he realized not yet ready to leave her. That's how they met. According to the man, he was in the process of divorce because of a worthless wife. Naturally, he was unhappy. And since he was earning well and gave Amber good gifts, she had already made plans for him. She had to marry William, and at any cost. For a very conflicted Amber, who could not get along with anyone until 40 years old, it was the last chance. So the woman wasn't backing down. "Good morning, Kitty," heard the man behind him. "Are you awake already? Come here." She held out her arms to him. "Amber, I'll finish one thing and we'll have a serious talk," William smiled. "Yes, I hope it's about our future," her eyes lit up. "Billy, when are we going to be together?" "About our future," he answered. Except William was going to talk about ending the relationship, not continuing it. Amber pulled her lover toward her. She was happy. She had no doubt that everything would be her way now. Amber had wanted to quit her job for a long time. She was fed up with it already. William looked so much like the kind of man who could provide for Amber. She had been living the dream of him for the last few weeks. Amber was ready to write her resignation letter tomorrow, but she needed assurances. Until William put an engagement ring on her finger, there was a chance he'd run away from her. Amber's sharp tongue scared off even the most patient men who seemed to love her. All in all, the lovers made different plans for each other. William had cooled his passion, and Amber no longer stirred a storm of emotion in him. He quickly turned on his phone and turned pale. Emily had called him many times, and at night. "Okay, I need to get to work." "The chief has already called several times." He quickly rushed out of the house. What's her problem? He thought as he got in his car and drove away from Amber's house. Around the corner, he stopped. "Emily, hi," he heard his wife's voice. "I'm sorry, I slept at the site. Didn't hear you call?" "Billy will talk to you later," she sounded angry. "I'm busy right now." William flinched. Something told him that Emily didn't believe his fables. Okay, later means later. He threw the phone down angrily and drove to work. Basically, they had already finished the renovations. They'd had a few days of downtime, and he'd spent all that time at Amber's place, coming over only in the evening so his son wouldn't suspect anything. "I should have broken up with her when she told him she was working at the hospital," the man said angrily to himself. "God forbid Emily finds out. She wouldn't forgive me this time. I don't need Amber for nothing, but I'm not leaving Emily." The man didn't even see himself contradicting himself. In his mind, it was normal to have an affair on the side and then kiss his wife as if nothing had happened. William thought that if he was living with Emily, it meant he loved her. There are no other options. He drove up to a friend's house with whom they worked together. There was nothing to do, and he didn't want to stay at Amber's place either. She'd already gotten everything she wanted the night before, and William was tired of her. But the mistress herself didn't think so. "Billy, can you get out for half an hour? I really need your help," she called to him. He went outside so his friend wouldn't hear him. "Yeah, I bought something here, something heavy. I need you to come over." The cab didn't want to take me. "All right, where are you?" "I got it. I'll be there in 15 minutes, he promised. Emily was very angry with her husband. She felt like this was all some kind of game. The evidence that William was hiding something was too obvious. His excuses didn't convince her. Emily couldn't find a place to be. She was very tired, but she couldn't sleep. She decided to go downtown to get some distraction, to go shopping. Emily got off the bus with no mood and headed towards the mall. She sat down on a bench. It was nice out, she sighed and looked around, and her gaze fell on the cars standing near the building. In the far corner, she saw some woman kissing her beau. Emily looked closely, but didn't see anything unusual. The lovers were too far away to see them in detail. But a car pulled away, and suddenly Emily saw that it was their passenger car. She had no doubt about it. Cab. She ran up to the car with the checkered license plate. "Please follow that blue Lada, just so they don't see us." "We're in pursuit," laughed the cabbie. "I hope there won't be a shootout." "No," Emily said angrily. "I don't have a gun. I don't carry them in public." The man froze in his seat. He didn't really like the passenger's joke, and they drove for about 20 minutes. William turned down a street. The cabbie followed him. The car stopped and Amber got out. The cab drove past. Emily tried to hide so she wouldn't be seen and saw her husband pulling something heavy out. It was a struggle for the woman to get home. She was torn by unbearable pain. She was alone, screaming for relief. At first she wanted to call her husband and tell him everything, but then she pulled herself together and wrote a message to her son that she would go to work today. She arrived at the hospital that night, asked her shift worker to go home. "Emily, what are you doing here?" Her lips quivered. "I'm fine. I thought I'd let Lily rest. I'll be on duty tonight. Can't you, Alexander?" Looked at her pale face, answered nothing, went to his room. Emily didn't know he was sleeping at the hospital tonight, too. He'd gotten a good night's sleep during the day. While they were gone, a patient had been brought in who urgently needed help. He had to be under constant observation for at least a couple days. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning. Emily sat in the nurse's room, crying. She didn't want to live, even though all of this was obvious. Emily didn't think she couldn't live through it this time. "I'm sorry, Andrew," she whispered. "Son, but I can't go on like this." She moved the jar of medication toward her. She didn't have the strength to fight anymore. She gave up, brought a mug of water to her lips, trembling, poured the pills on the table. Everyone slept so she would be found dead in the morning. Emily was so absorbed in her pain that she didn't even hear the footsteps. She put the palm of her hand to her mouth with the pills. "What are you doing?" Isaac Alexander rushed to her, grabbed the nurse's hand, and all the pills flew to the floor. "Emily, what's going on?" He squeezed her palm so tightly that she even shrieked. The woman stared at him blankly. The doctor opened the faucet, drew water, poured it over her head with lightning speed. "What are you doing?" "I'm wet." She came to her senses. She waved her hands away from the doctor. Isaac Alexander still managed to wipe her hair with a towel. He pulled the woman against him. Emily hugged him and sobbed loudly. "It's all right," he said in a gentle voice. "Emily, you're going to feel better now." He grabbed the nurse and dragged her into his office. He quickly took out some pills and threw them into a glass of water. Emily managed to drink them down. She was trembling. Isaac Alexander kept stroking her head. She began to calm down. "Thank you," she whispered. "Oh my God, I almost poisoned myself." She didn't even have the strength to cry. Isaac Alexander put her on the couch and stayed with her until she fell asleep. "Stupid girl," he scolded as he returned to his office. "No problem is worth taking your own life." Around 6, Emily opened her eyes and immediately remembered what had happened. She felt both ashamed and hurt that she could have died. She opened the door. Isaac Alexander was asleep. She gazed into his face. It was filled with light. I guess there are angels on earth, after all, she thought. That's how kindness and a desire to help people hide behind coldness and calculating. Isaac Alexander seemed so dear to her. Emily sat quietly in her chair and watched him. She didn't know how much time had passed, but at one point the doctor opened his eyes. "How long?" he asked immediately. "Emily, are you okay?" "Yes, thanks to you, I didn't make a fatal mistake. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here," she lowered her eyes. "Can you tell me what happened?" The doctor sat down on the couch. "Judging by what you wanted to do, something serious." "My husband cheated on me." And not for the first time, tears flowed down her cheeks. "When we were still living at home, he had an affair with our neighbor. And now Emily was silent. And now my husband is having an affair with Amber, remember? She told me at her birthday party that she'd met a prince. Well, it was him. I saw them together. Yeah, it's Santa Barbara. Isaac Alexander scratched his head. But if he's such an unreliable man, then he's hardly worth you taking your life because of him. I certainly won't now. It was some kind of obsession. I don't know how to explain it to you. I was in so much pain, she whispered. I understand. I was in the same situation myself once. After my wife died, I didn't want to live either. I tried slitting my wrists once, but I couldn't. And the second time I wanted to hang myself. But all the time someone held me back. I trusted this force, and now I am grateful to God that He did not allow my death. You have to live, no matter how difficult it is. It's the only way to understand why we've been given all this. Emily calmed down. She realized clearly that she would not stay with William, no matter how much their son suffered. She could never forgive her husband again. By 8, Amber came in, radiant. Emily was as cold to her as ever. Were you tortured last night? She was outraged. Why are you looking at me like I'm the enemy? Emily went to change. A doctor approached the post nurse. Isaac Alexander asked her to come in to see him. You wanted to see me? Amber tossed the doctor nonchalantly. I see Semyonov hasn't gotten any better. Yes, but this isn't about him, the doctor replied calmly. Amber, I'd like us to have a private conversation. The nurse jumped. The first thing that came to her mind was that Isaac Alexander would be imposing on her as a fiancé. Amber, a bad situation has come up, he began, and I don't even know how to tell you about it. What is it? The woman exclaimed impatiently. If you want to ask me out, I'm sorry, I'm busy. That's exactly what this is about. Amber, are you going to marry someone else's husband? Isaac Alexander's cheekbones flared. I don't know how this mistake happened, but your fiancé is Emily's husband. She saw you outside the mall yesterday. She followed you in a cab to your house. Her husband gave you a ride, Isaac Alexander pointed out. What a load of crap. Amber jumped out of his office and started calling her lover. Billy, answer quickly. Your wife, Emily. William disconnected immediately. Amber tried calling him many more times, but he blocked her number. Emily had already gone home, so she couldn't talk to her in person. William realized he was busted, angry at himself, but he had to get out of it somehow. The best option was to disappear out of sight for a few days for now to figure something out. Amber dialed up her rival. She was insanely angry, except the woman didn't realize that Emily had nothing to do with it at all. You stupid fool. She yelled into the phone. Why are you slandering me? Are you trying to make me look bad? You're having an affair with Billy and you want to get rid of witnesses. Amber, what are you talking about? Emily tried to talk to her calmly. Are you the one going out with my husband? I didn't interfere with your family. You're lying. Amber screamed. Are you sleeping with that asshole? I saw you. So you're cheating on your husband? The bitch loves my Billy. The woman didn't want to admit she'd been caught. It wasn't even that William had inherently lied to her. Amber didn't want to admit she'd gotten herself into such a messy mess. She just couldn't. Her reputation wouldn't let her. Amber was ready to tear everyone apart. William still hadn't returned her calls. The woman had worked her shift, but she wasn't going to let it go. Well, I'll show you, she threatened Emily. The bitch couldn't hold on to a man, and now she's blaming me. Amber had already realized that William was really her husband. But instead of being angry at him, she focused all her hatred on Emily. I'll show you. You'll be kicked out of the hospital, she threatened. You idiot. She got a man like that. Emily couldn't reach William either. Her son came home that evening, so she decided to talk to Andrew. Son, she sighed, you're a big boy and you understand something about life. Looked at him, mother. It happens that adults can go their separate ways. Did you and your father have a fight? The boy guessed. I won't get involved. If Dad leaves us, I won't feel guilty anymore, he reassured her. Thank you, Emily hugged him. Andrew, I love you so much. She already wanted to fly out of this cage to freedom, and she finally calmed down. She no longer saw any obstacle to staying with her husband. She had endured almost a year for her son's sake, but William had not changed, and Emily had no idea what problems lay ahead. Emily entered the hospital. She hated to cross paths with Amber, but Amber was waiting for her. Remember, she whirled her hands in front of her face. I'm not to be trifled with. Is it your fault that Billy cheated on you? I know what was really going on between you two. He told me everything. The other guy would have kicked you out of the house a long time ago. She was yelling really loud on purpose. What did he tell you? Emily asked with her arms crossed over her chest. Did he catch me with a man? That, too, Amber said angrily. I can see why you got your hands on that robot. Billy told me how you were having an affair with the guy in charge at your house. He wouldn't leave you for your son. The whole hospital was buzzing about Emily sleeping with Isaac Alexander. Naturally, Amber did it deliberately to cover her dirty deeds. Now, there were few people who believed Emily's words, even if she did say that Amber had been out with William. Emily knocked on the door to the doctor's office, walked in and couldn't stand it, covered her face with her hand and sobbed. Emily, what happened? He came up to her. Did your husband hurt you? No. Amber told everyone that you and I were lovers. Can you believe it? She sobbed. What the hell is that? He swore. She's confused about her connections. She can't see what's true and what isn't. And the worst thing is that everyone believes her. Emily looked at him with eyes full of tears. Idiot. She asked for it. He left the office abruptly. I'll cut her down. After lunch, the head doctor summoned Amber to his office. Isaac Alexander and Emily were already in the office. Amber Stevens, the chief, addressed her. On what grounds did you decide that your co-workers were engaging in lewd behavior at work? Did you see it with your own eyes? Amber really wanted to lie, but she felt the consequences would not be pleasant. No, she said quietly, her eyes downcast and silent. The head doctor gave her a hard look. Unfortunately, he did something she had not expected. He paused. You are fired, he said loudly. Bring a statement, and I'll sign it. Take it easy, the head doctor said. Amber, like you are a pond, and real specialists like Isaac Alexander can be counted on the fingers. If you had a brain, you wouldn't be making all this up. Amber walked out of the head doctor's office in crocodile tears, and her career was over. Her job didn't seem so bad now. Amber had gotten a small house from her first husband, so basically she'd settled into life pretty well. Now she had no money and no job. Emily thanked the doctor for his support and got to work. She decided not to wait any longer. Tomorrow morning she would try to find her husband. Isaac Alexander, let me use your phone to make a call, Emily asked the doctor before leaving. My husband doesn't take my calls. The doctor handed her the phone and left the office. Emily had a feeling William would answer it for her, since the call could have been from a potential client. Hello, the wife spoke quickly. I'm filing for divorce. There can be no talking. Your half of the house I'll buy out. Okay, I'll be there, William angrily replied and disconnected the phone. Emily drove home with only one question: where would she get the money for the house? Perhaps there was something her parents could do to help her. Maybe he would agree to match the alimony? The thought crossed her mind, though I'd even agree without them, just so he'd be out of my life. Before Emily could enter the house, William appeared on the doorstep. Andrew was already at school. Please don't be silly, Emily said immediately. Billy, we're adults. Everything has to be paid for. If you didn't understand anything after the first time, you'll never understand again. William didn't really engage in dialogue. He agreed to give up his share of the alimony. Basically, he was making good money. He packed some things and left. Emily was overjoyed. As she found out later, he'd moved in with Amber. The latter walked around with her head held high and said that she was right all along, but as soon as she got what she wanted, she started acting like she always had. That's why William never even got married. 6 months later, he packed up his things and left in an unknown direction. Amber had no choice but to badmouth him now. It wasn't like she could make a fool of herself. It was always someone else's fault in Amber's life. The relationship between Emily and Isaac Alexander, on the other hand, had become friendlier and warmer. "Emily, come see me," the doctor called her one day. "It's an emergency," he asked. Emily rushed over. The doctor was standing by the window, as he always did. He had a cup of coffee in his hands. "It's my birthday today," he smiled. "Would you like to keep me company? It's been so long since I've celebrated it. Do you want to take Andrew with you?" And go where her eyes lit up. "Isaac Alexander. I suggest someplace quiet." Andrew chatted with his father. To his mother's surprise, he'd gotten through the divorce easily. He was already going on 13. "Young one, sit by yourself," the son replied to her invitation. "You, on the other hand, Isaac Alexander will bring you. You won't be bored alone at home." She hugged him. "Andrew, you're all grown up now, so I understand you two needing to babysit," he laughed. "Ma, I like him." "Nice uncle," nobody called him uncle for sure, laughed his mother. "Okay, rest up." She ruffled her son's hair. That night was a new phase in the lives of both Emily and Isaac Alexander. 3 months later, they were married. And now Emily was taking care of him, keeping him from working so much. Of course, it was hard for Isaac Alexander to relax after so many years of hard work. But in their lives, there was another circumstance. Emily, almost 40, gave birth to his daughter. Isaac Alexander reduced the load at work to spend more time with his wife and children. They sold Emily's house and the doctor's parents' house, which was empty for many years. So they were able to travel a little and pamper the children. And they tried not to hurt themselves. Isaac Alexander was well paid for consultations in fee-based clinics. And Emily, as soon as her daughter grew up, returned to her home hospital.